So what are some of your thoughts or impressions about that piece?
It's really unique.
In what ways?
I've heard an arrangement quite like it.
Okay.
I think the textures were, some of them startled me. Like I wasn't expecting the bombastic things.
Oh, like the fanfare?
Yeah.
Uh,
And then I think there was some counter harmony or melody that all came together at the end, which was interesting.
mhm. Yeah, what about you, Timothy?
I think it was like the horns that came in at the beginning. I was not expecting like that many chromatic things happening.
And
around
counter melody.
The counter melody was,
Yeah.
was interesting.
Yeah. This is part of a two-disc collection that they recorded called Tidings of Comfort, Tidings of Joy. And Tidings of Comfort was more peaceful Christmas songs, and Tidings of Joy more, as you want to say, bombastic. Definitely energetic, at least. And so it's interesting. He said when they finished, the night they finished mastering the tracks, he felt like, I've done what I've been here to do. He's like, this is something he'd always wanted to do. Not that he wasn't going to teach more or do more pieces or concerts, but it's like kind of a life fulfillment thing for him, especially with Christmas music. He's always had me as well. Like at our school, our two main concerts were the Christmas program and the spring concert. We didn't have enough students and levels and stuff to be able to always do like a concert each quarter or whatever, some schools like the Academy are able to do. But I had to spend a lot of the time just helping the students get their skills up so we could play high school music, especially in our top group of our band there. But so about half the music that they ever played was Christmas music, and we'd have our stuff we'd take to the festival and then our spring concert. And so, a little bit more in the second half of the year as far as performance opportunities. But yeah, a lot of great Christmas music, and one of the cool things is whether you're in a Christian or a public environment, it's appropriate, especially an instrumental where they're not singing lyrics. You don't even have to worry about any of that. Just do a bunch of nice music and then make the connections that are appropriate for helping them to understand the context of the piece and what the composer and what the original writers of the lyrics and had in mind and all those type of things. So I would, as I listened to it, I also enjoyed the ways that he used counter melody throughout it. What would the form of that piece be?
Like A, B, something.
A, B.
Well, it's like seemed like then one part, and then they went together at the end.
Okay.
Well,
So was there ever a large portion of the piece where it wasn't going straight through the melody?
I think so. No?
They had the introduction, clarinet verse, clarinet with counter melody and gradually working into stuff, and then the whole group, and then it faded out with a little coda at the end with the clarinet starting but then fading off into the distance. So yeah, so we call that a theme and variations.
Okay.
So and the variation was in the accompaniment, not much in the melody. They tweaked it a little bit on he tweaked it a little bit on one of the verses, but yeah. So something else that you could teach educationally as far as just good examples of different forms and helping the kids to think through those things too. So another thing I enjoyed was the way he used kind of shimmery percussion, orchestra bell chords, just sparsely scattered behind the clarinet solo. And then at the end, just the wind chimes with, again, the solo clarinet, just kind of giving it a wintry feel in our associations. A lot of times we associate those sounds with cold or ice or things like that, and composers have throughout the years as well. So, all right, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Let's turn around and say hi to Nathan. Hi, Nathan. Hope you feel better. Let's pray for him and for protection for you guys from all that's going around. Anything else this morning? Would either of you like to lead us today?
Sure.
Okay.
Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the cold weather. I'm that we can enjoy different types of seasons, and but we do pray that it often for the people who are sick, as a COVID often does bring that, and especially Nathan, help him to feel better and regain his strength and be able to still keep up with his schoolwork, help out the rest of us to stay healthy. And we've got a series and just rehearsals coming up and different things help us to be able to stay on top of things. Bless our class time, help us to participate and think and learn, and help Mr. Townsend as well as he presents the material. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, so today we're starting out with teaching rhythm and rhythm reading, then we'll move on to teaching improvisation and composition in later hours here. So let's go ahead and just start with our class contributions again. It can be something from either chapter, just something that stood out to you, so go ahead and look at your book or your notes or whatever you need to, and then we'll get going with our things that we plan to do together.
I do have a question.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of what we were talking about last time, and so we were talking about different syllables and different methods of using them.
Yeah, so they kind of got into all that in the chapter this time, didn't they?
Yeah. So what would you say is more important? Like, if you find out that the high school is using a certain system and like the elementary school is using another system, and you're teaching middle school, let's say, would you try to keep it consistent, or would you rather do your own system?
You have something different on each end.
Yeah.
I've never really thought of that. A lot of times, it's really easy to go to a counting system. There's a lot less to learn actually in it. So for my high schoolers, the only time this kind of came up for me was when we're going to go take them to a band festival, and I knew the directors there would be talking about counting things, you know. And so I would just introduce them to the idea, and they understood it. They didn't have any problem. I teach them, okay, you're just counting the beats of the measure, which we were used to anyway when we counted rests and things. But I would say they just start each beat with the number instead of the syllable, and then the syllables are 1 E and 2 E and instead of to data, you know. And I'd say in triple meter, a lot of people do things differently. 1 tita, 2 tita, 1 lolly, 2 lolly. They just find some syllables to fill in the gaps and do the basic meter. But then it's just, that's about all there is to it. You know, there's not all these levels to it for different meters and different functions and everything. So it's pretty easy to for them to make that transfer. So if I was middle school, I would talk with my high school director and just have the conversation about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and you know, see if you know, what their thoughts are on that, and then if they really would like to stay with what they're doing, I just introduce it to them at the end of the year before they go up in 8th grade. So, but there's so much more you can do with a system like the Gordon system, and it's so much more closely tied to audiation and especially improvisation, which is not only one of the key learning activities, but also assessment activities that you have for the audiation side of things. So I wouldn't make that trade. I'll tell you, my high schoolers, when I would have those, when I do the explanation, they'd say, well, why would you throw the numbers in there? You don't need them. It's just like an extra level, you know. And then they'd say, oh, those syllables sound weird, you know, whatever you're used to. Everything else sounds weird, but you know, but I would grin inside. I'm like, yeah, you don't need the numbers. I mean, if you're audiating the rhythms and feeling the meter inside, the numbers are just mainly about talking where in a written measure you're drawing their attention to, you know. But to try to think of like saying which beat you're on in a measure as well as what the sound of the rhythm is just seemed superfluous to them, and kind of is. But anyway, it's interesting. What we call a counting system really is a combination between an actual counting system and a syllable system. A true counting system just uses numbers. You hear, like, even in like the jazz world, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're counting out the macro beats and the micro beats. If you took it again, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You just kind of, you're thinking how many sounds on a beat and you're counting that. But what we think of as the counting system traditionally is the Eastman system, where they said, well, this isn't enough, we need something else, and let's talk about parts of the beat and everything. And so they did the E-endas and all that type of thing. But excuse me. So, and then eventually people, you know, like with Dr. Gordon, he's familiar with all the Kadai stuff. He grew up himself with all the counting stuff, and then he was influenced by his time in one of the major big bands, jazz bands of the 50s. He was a bass player for it. And so he started thinking about things from the aspect of how does rhythm sound and feel, instead of how do they look notated on a page, because a lot of times they might have a lead sheet, but they could play it in any key depending on who the vocalist was, or you know, it didn't really matter. It was just a starting point for him. So that was bizarre and really new to him at the time. He'd come up bass performance all the way through masters and Eastman there, masters in bass performance. And so, but then he started thinking about, okay, the counting system is pretty limited, but Kadai is really based on notation. And then he started thinking of, you know, what could I do to represent all the common meters around the world and make it consistent and you know, fix a lot of these problems that either one had in his perspective. And then, like I said, since then, I think more like in the 90s or early 2000s, the Takadimi band directors wanted to extend that idea, but address some other things that his hadn't addressed, a couple other things. So that's kind of the history of it. But they've had some kind of rhythmic syllables or way to put sounds to rhythms to learn them for a long, long time. You know, that even you go back to early colonial America, there's some John Tufts wrote a curriculum for the singing schools to teach music reading so you could sing hymns in church. And the singing school movement was the main music education in the U.S. before the mid-1800s, and in the South even long after that. So, you know, that's been an idea people have played with to more or less extensive amount, you know, depending on what their needs were. Hymns are pretty simple rhythmically, so that one didn't do a whole lot. It didn't go into very complex things. But yeah, just kind of interesting to look through the history of that and see development. You get me going on these ideas, I'll go forever. Did I ever address your question? I just wanted to.
You would intro the following system.
Oh yeah. So connecting. So yeah, I would just say, and then maybe practice counting some things out just so they're ready to, you know, make. But if they can audiate rhythms, counting's superfluous. It's just a way to talk about notation at that point. They can already do what they need to do. Did you have a thought for us, Abby?
Yeah, it's interesting about body movement and how the foot tapping thing.
Yeah, that kind of goes against traditional pedagogy a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, because like in ensembles and stuff, they're not supposed to tap our foots, like. Which I understand that. I like it at a collegiate level, but like it looks unprofessional, and you're supposed to have the rhythm, the beat internalized anyway. But as far as like, heaps of kids do it like all the time, and teachers are saying, okay, don't tap your foot, like stuff like that. So it's just, I don't know, interesting.
So a lot of beginning instrumental teachers, especially, it's almost always instrumental teachers, will do the foot tapping thing. And they'll make them do it. And there's even in band, there's a tradition of like down, up, where you're feeling the macrobeat and the microbeat in that way. But again, once you can audiate, it shouldn't be necessary, and it's distracting, and you start hearing on the stage during every performance if your kids are all doing that, you know. The thing about the toe tapping, it's just it's supposed to be a small, discrete movement. But first of all, it mainly addresses macrobeat. Second of all, it's just a tiny thing moving on you. So if you're talking about connecting movement, teaching rhythm and meter through movement, it's probably the least effective movement possible. But it is a movement. All right, it's way out there on your extended part of your frame, and it's a tiny movement, right? So and it's a stop, 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 stop metronomic type thing, and really feeling steady beat and tempo is about being able to imagine the feeling of the space between the beats, not just having this beat, 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 beat that stops and starts every time. So it's really, it's kind of missing a lot of the point of moving with music. And you'll just see kids who can't audiate, they'll just start tapping their toe faster or slower with whatever's going on inside with them. But then it's a mechanical thing. All right, keep your toe, every time I do a downbeat, your toe comes down, you know, it's that type of thing. So it's an external in attempt at coordinating ensemble rhythm rather than an inside out, help them learn to actually audiate and then give them the control of the keeping the beat inside, you know. And then this up here is partly about the beat, but it's also about style, articulation, other things. And I can stop and they'll just keep going, they'll be fine, you know. I'm not needed to be a metronome, I just get us started. I do the, I'm needed for the ritardando or a accelerando, just so we all do it exactly the same, stop and start type of things. But other than that, the conducting pattern's more about style and other things, so. But, so we'll get into types of movement here, and that's a good lead into it. But that's kind of where they're coming from. They're just saying it's an insufficient movement, and your college teachers are saying it's distracting and you shouldn't need it by now. So we'll talk about clapping rhythms too a little bit later. I'll get your ideas on that, but that's another one of these really often used techniques that we should probably think about at this point and think where it would be effective and what it would be effective for and what it wouldn't really help that much and stuff like that. So, all right, anything else? Anything from the improvisation and composition chapter?
I actually didn't read that.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought the quiz, it's like due later, so I was like,
That's fine.
it was late last night, I was like, ah.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm gonna do that hopefully.
Did I not have the quiz due by class
It's
today?
like due at like 7:50 tonight or something.
Oh, I probably put PM instead of AM on
It
that.
had like military time. I was like, oh, let's do it at night. Yay.
That's fun. Well, military time would be morning if it said 7:50.
No, it said
Oh, it said the
19:15.
19 something?
19:50.
That's weird. I'll have to check that out. That's funny.
Well,
Anyway, yeah, it's not going to kill anything. It's not going to wreck what we're doing, because what I'm doing is adjacent to what they're going over anyway. It's not just echoing it.
Yeah.
It's I tend to my first semester here teaching, I tended to just kind of go through the main thoughts of the chapter again with them. And then one of my comments when I discussed, you know, because I didn't know how things worked in college. I was just thinking back to my days, you know. And it was a juniors and seniors class I was teaching, and they said, well, yeah, I know that you want to emphasize the main ideas in the book, but we've already read it. It'd actually probably be more helpful if you just started there and went on and did something in addition. And I was like, oh, that's a really good comment. So that's more what I tend to do. Like we'll connect with the ideas in the book, but then I'll add to it in class instead of repeat it in class, so to speak. And back then I was very structured. I'd just like make an outline of whatever was in the book and then just do it in lecture form, you know. And then throw my own things in a little bit too, but that was more as an aside, not as the main plan, you know. So that was kind of interesting. I actually learned a lot from that group, from their comments, that it was very helpful, and classes since then. Our music ed students, especially by the time you get to be upperclassmen, you've had a lot of great teachers in before you got here and once you got here, and you usually have some good ideas about how we can help meet our objectives in a better way in some ways. So keep that thought in your mind, and we can have discussions about it whenever you want, or formally at midterm and finals. So,
I have, can I ask some questions on the quiz?
Yeah.
Because I didn't do too well on it.
Okay, yeah, so that's another thing. I meant to say not just the book, but if you have questions about why you got things wrong or why why I said once something was a correct answer, that would be a good thing to bring up for our class contributions too, because
Okay.
most likely, if you're dealing with it, others are too, so.
Yeah, it will work. I'm very not much for you. But I think one of the things I got wrong was when we were matching the different systems with the slight description of it.
Oh, yeah.
Um, And I was just confused. Like, first of all, I couldn't find the answer directly in the book, so I was like, okay, I know I need to like
Yeah,
infer,
right.
which I knew you were getting at. But
So just kind of from reading the descriptions in the book, which would fit most closely with the
Yeah.
description I gave there.
but it was still a tiny bit confusing. I
Okay.
don't know if you have that question on
I can bring it up too here,
This one,
then we can all see
Yes.
it. Let's do that, because then
Um,
Nathan will be able to see what you're talking about as well.
it was, yeah, I remember.
And then I looked at one of the answers, and like two of the answers are the same, I think. So I just
Yep.
was wondering about.
Yeah, okay, let me just get Canvas course, and there we go. And it's the quiz over chapter 2
Chapter
you're
2.
talking about, okay.
Mhm.
So let's look at quizzes here. Chapter 2. And I'm not gonna bring yours up, I'll just bring the questions up here, but which
Uh-huh.
question are we talking about?
Specifically question 8.
8? Okay.
Uh-huh. And then I'd like to talk about question 10 as well.
Sure. Okay, so question 8, match each rhythm system with its correct description. So we had Kodai, Gordon, Takadimi, counting. And which one where did you have the question about?
So for me, I got Kodai and Gordon wrong.
Okay.
It's the same as I got.
Really? Okay. So for Kodai, I put that it was based on matching common words to rhythms. We used to say them, like ta, ti, ti. And then Gordon, I put based on representing common rhythm patterns with syllable sets. And I thought that meant like you're focused more on the rhythm pattern, not necessarily I was confused.
Okay, so in Kodai, and maybe there's a better way to say that, I'll think about that. But in Kodai, each rhythm pattern has a different set of syllables,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
As opposed to being used functionally where the syllable on the macro beat's always the same, the syllable on the micro beat's always the same, no matter what the pattern is. So for instance, if you had, let's say we're in 2/4 and we had 8th quarter 8th, we would say do ta ta, because underneath all the rhythms is do ta data, do ta data, and we would say when each of those starts, right? They go cinco pa, and they just make up a word that can help you remember the sound, but it has nothing to do with tas, it has nothing to do with TTs, tiri-tiris, you know, they don't go tiri-e, you know, or tiri-re, you know, that, even though that would make sense functionally, that's not the point of the Kodai system. The point of the Kodai system is to take familiar rhythmic sounds, make a mnemonic device, this syllable system, that helps kids remember, and then match it to exact notation. So, and I'm talking about traditional Kodai. Like I said, in the last 20 years, people are starting to try and use it more functionally and things. But for instance, also cinco pa would always be 8th quarter 8th. It would always be those 3 note values, because they're trying to match this exact sound to this exact rhythm word that's different from all the other rhythm words, and then match it to this set of written notes, rhythmic values.
That makes
Okay.
sense now.
So based on representing common rhythm patterns with, and I can't read the rest of it, what's the rest of it, syllable sets? Okay, as opposed to Gordon and Takadimi, which are based on how rhythm and meter sounds and feels.
Okay.
So this is based on, it's based on how rhythm sounds in a way. So that may be the part that's a little confusing. Maybe I can think of a better way to say that. But the big difference is that every different rhythm pattern has its own set of syllables that doesn't coordinate with any of the others.
That makes sense. Okay,
Okay.
I understand that.
And then with counting, it's based on, it's totally based on notation, and it's talking about where in a measure you are, right?
Yeah.
Kudai is used before notation and then connected to it. So that's kind of a step in between counting and then Gordon and Takti. You can teach Gordon or you can teach counting, I'm sorry, from a functional way too. It's just not the traditional way it has been taught. So, but I'll say if you want to teach from a functional rhythm, which is a system based on how it sounds and feels, not necessarily on how it's notated or how it combines with common words in our language, or then these two are the ones that do that were designed to do that, and that you can most easily make that connection with. You can do it some with the others, but these you can do it really, really, really well. And the other thing that we haven't talked about here is just the ease of improvising with it. Does it have enough information to account for the variation of different rhythms and meters, but does it not have an extra layer or two of information that you don't need? And I would say like until you get to reading notation, counting doesn't really even make sense. Unless you're just thinking of at the measure level 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But again, we're not focusing on the measure level when we're bringing kids to audiation. That would be kind of the next step after they can audiate at the macro beat level. Then we approach the measure level, and we can use the same syllables to do that. But, all right, again, you get me going on these ideas. I can talk forever. Did I ever answer what you were asking? No. Okay. What other questions are?
Number 10.
Okay.
I didn't see anything in the chapter about it, so I ended up going to a previous chapter to look at the full levels of the sequence. Which
Yes.
is oral.
So this is what I was talking about the other day.
Okay.
All right. This is where, let's see, where did they actually, page 33, okay. Okay, so stages 1 through 4 are under using flashcards there. Okay, learn what the, let's see. Is that the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, learn what they say word, rhythm word, we'd say pattern. Learn what the pattern sounds like and be able to repeat it on a neutral syllable. That sounds like which Gordon stage?
Oral.
Yeah, oral. Attach an oral label or name to the word, rhythm syllables. Which stage is that?
Verbal association.
Verbal association. Learn to recognize it by ear and perform it with its appropriate label. So that's kind of verbal association too, right? That'd be like verbal association B, where we're doing the same patterns again, and I'll say ba, 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 and you say do, do, day, back. That's kind of a preparation for moving on. Associate visual notation with the oral word. Symbolic association. So which level did we skip? Partial synthesis. Most systems, including Kudai and Dalcroze and accounting system, any way that people have typically taught rhythms doesn't account for the synthesis stages, like stages 3 and 5 of Gordon's skill learning sequence. That's what's really different about discrimination learning from Gordon's perspective and from everyone else's before him perspective. They don't ever specifically draw kids' attention to the underlying musical context in a formal way. They may give words like meter words, like duple or triple, but they're not really testing the kids on whether they're audiating the meter, whether they're doing while they're doing the syllables. They're just having them do the syllables, so that's really the big difference. Is in the third, the synthesis stages, which is 3 and 5 of discrimination learning, you're focusing kids on the large underlying musical context and having them do activities and answer questions about the context, not the patterns themselves. All right, so that was just a point I wanted to make that, and again, this is all way later than those systems were developed. So it's just kind of an addition that, okay, some kids get that naturally, but a lot of kids don't. We should help them get that. It's just kind of a next step in music education to start thinking that way. But unfortunately, a lot of people that haven't had that background still don't ever really address present. You know, it's not common for teachers to address those things even yet. You know, that's something that we're, those of us who are familiar with these ideas are trying to get more into the mainstream. Things like singing in ensemble rehearsal is gradually making its way in. Things like functional rhythms are gradually making their way in. And this would be another thing just for your teaching. Yes, it can work to go straight from 1 to 2 to 4, but work means they're saying rhythms accurately. It doesn't mean they're audiating them. They're mimicking them, they're getting close, but who knows what's going on inside of them besides just the rhythm patterns themselves. Are they putting them in a context inside, or are they not? You know, that's where we spend time actually making sure they are with a music learning theory approach. The other thing is that's kind of a test for that you can know if they are, is if they can improvise whatever you're doing, you know. So if you're a verbal association, you're in duple meter, and you're doing up through division patterns, can they improvise with those? If they can do that accurately, they're audiating, you know, and then they're ready to go on to notation. So, but that's just another way to kind of test. But you in your mind are doing a kind of informal partial synthesis level. Then you're not doing the same activities that Dr. Gordon would have in his learning sequence activity book, but you're kind of testing for it. But just make sure that you've taught them that, you've taught them to listen for those things, you've taught them to feel those things, and that they're consciously doing both, not just happen to do it, you know. And that's where partial synthesis comes in. You're seeing if they're consciously understanding what's happening underneath what they're performing. Okay. So, all right. Any other questions about the quiz there? Now we gave Nathan a couple answers, and we probably could see a couple more here, but that's all right. You need some help catching up, I'm sure, right? Okay, let me get out of that. All right. Any other thing you guys want? Any other ideas you guys want to bring up before we get going with our planned sequence here today? Okay, so we'll probably cover most of the ideas, address most of the big ideas, and if it jogs something, yeah, just jump in any time here. But today let's focus on rhythm instruction in the ensemble setting. I like this picture. Looks like somebody doing their clinical practice, or maybe one of the kids that is working as a leader with a teacher or something. Just kind of a cool picture. All right, tips for teaching rhythm. Now, where do you guess we're going just from the picture there? That is Dalcroze. Very good. No, we're not going to Dalcroze, but we're going to connections to movement. And Dalcroze is the one that really influenced Dr. Gordon's thinking in this area. So a lot of connections with what they do in the Dalcroze approach to teaching rhythm. So the big idea here is that if you want to word it this way, we think pitch, we feel rhythm. Rhythm's about imagined motion, imagined movement, physical movement, as it were. Pitch is more about something that happens more inside our head, and it's actually processed in a completely different area of the brain than rhythm is. I think the chapter went over that. One's cerebral cortex, one's cerebellum. I think is it. Pitch is cerebral cortex, rhythm cerebellum. Anyway, totally different areas of the brain that are processing and controlling those two, which is interesting because, you know, Dr. Gordon's early research showed you really ought to teach them separately, and that there are separate aptitudes for rhythm and pitch, and there's actually a physical brain reason for that as well. You know, so just trying to approach rhythm cognitively first, before you've experienced the movement, will have limited success. Some kids will naturally apply it to the movement, and they figured that all out if they're especially higher rhythm aptitude, but a lot of kids won't. So that's the big idea: connect rhythm and movement in your mind. Now, what kind of movement? Clapping, tapping your toe, or something else? That's a lot of what we're headed toward next year. There are different types of movement that are more effective for different reasons. So tempo. Remember we talked about the rhythmic context being tempo at its most basic level, the idea of a reoccurring steady beat, and then upon that meter, which is a second. So let's focus on tempo here, which is kind of more specific, actually. Continuous flow movement in chanting is the best way to help students learn to audiate the idea of tempo. So when we're in elementary music, especially lower elementary, we're having them do things like take a little friend for a ride and show them your, maybe you have like a little gerbil on your hand or whatever your little friend is, and you're showing them different things, and you're just kind of smoothly going around the room introducing them to your friend while music's playing, and then maybe you'll say, all right, draw a circle with your hand while the music's playing, and if you hear it get faster, go faster. If it's slower, slower, So, and then draw a circle with both hands. Now walk while you're drawing a circle. And you're basically getting them to do expressive dance is what you're doing without calling it that. And that's what really gives you a good sense of connecting tempo and motion, that continuous flow motion movement. Because the way that people that successfully internally can process tempo and be consistent with it is by imagining the consistent feel that not only involves when the beats happen, but all the space between the beats. Mm-hmm. So the way Dr. Gordon would say it is you're imagining the space between the beats or feeling the space between the beats. And so if we just start out, even in elementary music with beat movement, we're skipping a step. Mm-hmm. All right? So if you look at a lot of the early childhood music activities that are based on these ideas, they'll have kids start with continuous flow movement, and then they'll have them put like microbeat flicks onto the continuous flow movement, but they're still moving. It's not a start-stop thing. And then eventually maybe macro beats, and there's a bigger space between them, and they're just kind of experiencing both the beats and the space between the beats. And then they can imagine the space between the beats and go to just the beat movement, which would be marching or conducting or, conducting is a way actually for older students that we can approach this idea because it seems age appropriate. Like you just start in asking high schoolers to do expressive dance in front of each other. They just won't, right? So you got to kind of not trick them, but work them into it being okay. And something that's an authentic part of high school level music making is conducting, right? So especially if you're conducting in a legato way, that's a type of continuous flow movement with macro beats added onto it, right? But even better than that, before that, and you can say, all right, we're going to do some activities to get you guys used to conducting. Doing those different shapes in the air, the circles or the figure eights or things like that, or spirals up and down. You're getting used to high space, medium, low space, that would be a way while music is playing or while they're saying rhythms or while they're, some of them are saying rhythm or playing rhythms and some of them are moving, just finding ways to get them, first of all, moving and then moving while musical sound is going on, either listening or producing it themselves, right? So, and then you can take that, the next logical step is continuous flow motion with steady beats shown. And so that would actually be conducting. So, but that's again, second step, not first step. And you probably can't have them moving around the room, which when we talk about types of movement, the most effective are the ones that shift your center of gravity. You feel your whole body change. That's why the toe tapping is probably the least effective way to approach connecting movement with music. But it's not that it's ineffective, it's just not nearly as effective as the larger movements or the complex movements that we'll get to with meter here in a second. All right, so continuous, well, anytime you have people that are, anytime your groups are rushing or gradually slowing down, one of the reasons that could be, especially on the rushing, is that they're not feeling the space between the beats. So have them at that tempo, just do continuous flow. I'd go like sideways figure eight type of back and forth that is sort of conducting, you know, but it's not an actual pattern. And have them just say maybe the microbeats and then the macrobeats, and then say, all right, now imagine that feeling of the motion and feel the space in between the beats while you're playing or while you're singing this time. And usually just doing that quick little thing, most of them will get it at that point. But you're just having to activate that imagining motion, which some of them naturally do. They feel music is connected with movement, and some of them don't if they haven't been brought up that way and haven't personally made that connection yet. Or they've just forgotten they're focusing on something else. Now, if your groups are continually slowing down, it could be an audiation tempo thing, or it could be a physical manipulation thing where they just can't do it that fast yet. If it's technically difficult, they'll slow it down just because they're not ready to go that fast, you know. So we'll talk later about diagnosing and prescribing. Why is it not going the way it should go? Audiation's always one of those, but there can be technique and other things that are reasons as well. So figuring that out is part of what experience gives you. As you're starting the semester and continuing on after that. So tempo, continuous flow. Rhythm patterns, beat movement, and chanting. So now this is what we did a lot of in 242, where I was having you show the macro beats and percussion class. I think both of you are taking percussion class, right? Yeah. Where we were going back and forth. Now it's not a continuous flow in the same way. It's a beat movement, but it's not, you know, stiff. It's a go side to side. And you keep your knees loose and you keep moving between the beats. So you're still applying that, and then you're adding macro beats and micro beats at the same time. And then feeling rhythm patterns on top of. So here's your rhythm context, the movement, and then the rhythm patterns themselves are the performance level, right? The level that you'd be singing or playing or whatever. So as you're doing rhythm patterns, you're just saying them with your mouth, but eventually you'll imagine the feeling of moving to macro beats and micro beats while you play them on your instrument. And you tell them, okay, now let's do the same thing on our instrument. We're not going to move all around because we have to play our instruments now, but imagine that feeling of moving to macro beats and micro beats as you're playing. And some people, you know, maybe even do a little of this as they play, and that's a good thing, right? That they're kind of showing you what's going on inside of them. In fact, Dr. Valerio at USC, when she came a couple springs ago, I guess, a couple years ago, was it fall? Maybe a year and a half ago. I can't remember exactly when it was she was here. But we were meeting over near the academy there in that room. I can't remember what they call the room there, but kind of that big room with a stage and stuff. And we were sitting in a big circle on the floor. And you notice every time she's singing, she's kind of moving around. Even when she's seated, she's kind of doing circles with her body. And the kids just see that and naturally do that. And that's a way with the really young ones that she just kind of gets them into that habit of connecting music. Music is flow, music is movement, not just a sequence of sounds that are shorter or longer apart, you know. So those are having your kids do the rhythm patterns, just echoing and moving, and it can be patterns from their pieces you're practicing. It can be just things that are in the meter of the piece you're practicing and the basic tempo of it. Or it can just be something in warm-ups that you're gradually working through rhythm sheets like we did in percussion. But having, even at the high school level, more advanced pattern back and forth, improvising, applying to your instrument, it is a really valuable activity. Number one, it's just helpful for everybody. Number two, it's essential for those that didn't grow up with all of that. You'll always be getting kids in and losing kids. And there's turnover every year. So just having that, especially at the beginning of the year for older groups, and then whenever it's needed for just introducing new rhythms or new meter. I remember the first time in our advanced band group that we got to a piece that was in an uneven meter. I just had them stand up and we moved to it in the tempo that the piece is going to be. We set some patterns back and forth. We improvised some patterns back and forth. Then we sat down and played the piece and never had to help them with counting, you know. it just, they felt it. So they knew, oh, then we, I told them, I connected the sounds, the movements and the sounds with the note values that represented them. And in this case, it was, that type of thing. 2 longs, 2 shorts. And then even faster. Dun, 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 dun. But you hear almost every group, if they just tried to count it out, would totally dun 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 dun. They totally rush the last 2 notes because they're just not feeling any microbeats or anything under them. They just know it's shorter than the other ones, I was actually, I knew that was a good thing to do, but I was amazed at how quickly, since they were used to connecting motion to music, even though it was a newer sound for them to read, they'd improvised in unusual meters of different kinds before, and now it was an easy step to do that with the piece that we were playing. I would do the same thing if we were sight reading something in a college ensemble, and I could tell that people weren't really feeling the meter. I do the exact same thing. So that's one activity that's exactly the same from 1st grade through professional. And then apply everything to your instruments, right? So we move, we tell them, okay, this is what to feel inside, this is how to connect it to notation, then we play it. Did it happen? No, let's get up and move again. Let's try again, and it's just a up and down, back and forth. And it's a nice break. You have to sometimes have some of them hold their instruments while they move. I don't know if there's a good place to set everything on the floor, or if that's even something you want them to do. But so it's a little different in an instrumental setting, but same idea. Maybe instead of patting with 2 hands, you're patting with 1 when you hold the instrument or something. Okay. And then, what about clapping? So one of the most common things, I'm sure if you get in an instrumental setting here, either in practicum or in your clinical practice, this is a technique that everybody's been taught and that everybody does in instrumental music. If we're not consistent on our rhythms, let's clap them together. All right? So let's clap measures 1 through 8 here. Ready, go. Or if we're just doing drills on rhythm patterns, let's clap them and then let's play them. What do you think about that, from what you know about movement so far? Is that helpful in some way? Is it better for some things than others? Is it great? Is it applying everything we've been talking about?
I think it could be useful for assessing a group of students. We did it in elementary practicum where we had them use rhythm sticks, and then that was helpful to see who's actually reading, I guess, the rhythm as opposed to just going crazy on the rhythm sticks.
So instead of clapping, you were having them click rhythm sticks together. Yeah, same type of idea, right? In a instrumental ensemble setting, they won't have rhythm sticks around them. You just clap. So first of all, what are some obvious good parts to it as far as connecting rhythms and movement and stuff?
It's a very precise way of doing rhythm, at least. I don't know about beat necessarily, but rhythm is very precise.
Okay, beat, and what's the second level underneath? So tempo is beat.
Beat.
All right.
Micro, divisions, subdivision.
Meter is what we're going. Remember tempo, beat, movement, and chaining. Okay, I should have said, I said beat movement. I should have said metric movement or something there. That's what I'm referring to anyway. Yes, clapping is a larger body than, say, tapping toe. And it's a different way than just playing to assess. So most people are pretty comfortable moving their arms together, whereas they're still getting used to instruments. So it's finding a way that's easier to, like taking out what we call the noise, the extra variables, and just getting right to connecting brain to sound in some way, right? So that's great. It's, again, assessing the rhythm patterns. It's not having them connected to either of the levels underneath necessarily. They could just be kind of following each other and copying the visual of it, right? So to me, it's a lot closer than a tapping and toe tiny movement, but even better is standing up, moving to the two levels you need to make a meter, the macrobeats and the microbeats, and then tizzling with a wind instrument would make sense, or doing some motion that connects to what you're actually going to do next. So for percussion, maybe clapping, you're moving your arms, but you never move them together, you move them up and down, you know. For brass and woodwinds, it's a tonguing thing that's making the different rhythms, tonguing and breath. For strings, maybe you want to do air bows, you know, just whatever. To me, a better thing would be to move to the 2 beat levels and then do something that approximates what you're going to do next, like bridge the gap, so to speak. And we're just thinking of scaffolding here, basically. We're talking about that concept, right? So we've done a lot of moving and saying patterns back and forth, and we could start with that. But then maybe a next step before the instruments, if it's something that's complicated, is move to the meter and do some rhythm that's close to what they're about to, or some movement that's closer to what they're about to do, and then do it, you know. So, and again, they may not need all those steps, but it may just be a fun variation of this time you do it this way, this time you do it this way. But I'll say clapping's not going to hurt anything for sure, it's going to help. But what would even be better is do something where you're, again, performing rhythms in the context of metric movement, right? And not just even beat movement, but metric movement. Because a lot of times, you know, you tap the toe and you clap, that's beat movement, that's 2 of the 3. But if you can get all 3 in there, macrobeat, microbeat, rhythm patterns, then that's best.
Yeah. Right? Well, I know with clapping, it always rushes. Like, okay, you're at this booth.
Okay, tell me why.
I don't know, the band was playing.
Think about what we're talking and tell me why.
Yeah, well, I guess there isn't a lot of spatial, like.
Think of the space between the beats.
Yeah.
It's like that metronome thing. Tick,
unless
tick,
you're going
tick,
like.
tick.
I
Yeah,
don't
unless
know.
you're doing like. Yeah, you know, doing it in a real Floyd way. There's no space in between the beats, so they're not audiating tempo.
Yeah.
They're just trying to perform rhythm patterns, not in a context, just one after the other, right? Exactly, yeah. So doing even a beat movement, like a toe tap. Okay, here's a better option than toe tap, by the way. We talked about needing large body, large weight motions. Tap your heel instead. Okay? Same, sitting down, same position, and it's not something we'll do for a whole piece, but if you want to keep a beat movement going while you're doing something else, that's a better option. And you can even do move your heel and pat your lap, so do both. That type of thing, and while you're saying something, and then while you're playing it, just do that part of it, you know. Same basic ideas you're trying to get at with the toe tapping, but a lot more effective. If they can set their instruments down, I'll just use this one. So instead of standing up, moving back and forth, and patting your lap, in an instrumental ensemble, both heels up and down, both hands, or at least one hand if you have to hold an instrument. You know, that'll give them, it doesn't give you the back and forth shifting your weight thing, so it's not quite as good as the standing up. But if you're just doing a quick thing to remind them that that's an easy back and forth. All right. So heels and patting the lap, as opposed to stepping back and forth and patting the lap.
So what again is the idea of contrasting the heel and the toe?
What's that?
Why the heels more than that?
Look at how much me is moving with each one.
Oh, I see.
A lot more weight.
Okay.
Big, again, for getting whole body motion is the most effective way to feel any kind of beat movement. And then by having heels and hands, we can do the 2 levels, just like stepping back and forth, feet and hands, right? Okay, and especially if they've done a lot of the moving, maybe in warm-ups or something, they've done a lot of this in the past, then this will just kind of reactivate it in their memory, and they don't need to always stand up and find places for this. You know, that's a lot of rigmarole to do in the middle of an instrumental ensemble rehearsal sometimes. But it is one of the best ways to get at giving, not only showing kids how the rhythms fit into the context of tempo and meter, but no, my mind just went blank. I was thinking of a scene and then I was like, oh, where was I going with that? We're talking about large body movement not only helps them feel
rhythm and content.
context and meter. I'm gonna have to come back to that. The idea just flew out of my mind. All right. Someday or sometime in the middle, we'll sing something else. Let's come back. All right. So let's continue. Tips for teaching rhythm continued here. Teach rhythm as patterns instead of individual notes. We're really familiar with that. You notice they emphasize that in the book too. And what do we mean here by instead of individual notes?
Like, this is a quarter
This is a
note.
quarter note.
Yeah.
It gets 1 beat in 4/4 time. This is an 8th note. It gets half a beat. Here's a 16th note. It gets a quarter of a beat. A 32nd note would get an 1/8 of a beat. That's all a bunch of true statements, but that's not how we internalize rhythm, one rhythmic value at a time. We feel it in patterns that are usually coordinated with the macrobeats in some way, right? So if we think of beat patterns, you can have a quarter note, you can have 2 8 notes, not 1 8 note, you can have 4 16ths, 3 quarter note triplets. We think of these little pattern chunks or words. They say words. I don't like to use that direct of a language comparison because they're not words, they don't have definitions. But we know what they mean. Little sonic ideas that are repeated over and over. I just call them patterns, right? So teach rhythms as patterns instead of individual notes. And then later in the theoretical understanding, and especially when you're learning to write music and things like that, you can talk about some of those things, and they make sense at that point because you can audiate them. Otherwise, it's just a list of facts you're memorizing that have no application for you. So, sequential instruction allows mastery. So we don't just start with complex stuff, we work up to it. We work up to it not only technically, what's harder to do physically, but audiation, what's simple and more complex to audiate. So everybody is used to working up from simple to complex technically. There's also this side of simple to complex audiation-wise that's just as, if not more important. You need both. And I would say sequence, at least at first, according to audiation, not technique. Then develop the technique you need to play it, or sing it, but in our case, play it. Right? Why? Why not do it the other way around?
Well, you could, but they'll probably be better at that technique if that audiation is strong, because then they just have to worry about the physical little nuances of the instrument instead of they already hear the music, so they can read it.
You'll notice that kids who are audiating learn almost every aspect of technique much more quickly, because all they have to do is get the one little physical thing and they put it right into the musical context. If you're just doing technique separate from audiation, then maybe you get the coordination, but it still won't sound musical because it's not going with anything. Kids who are audiating, you don't have to teach phrasing to and drill them on it. They take a breath, they think the phrase, they take a breath that's big enough to make it through the phrase, or they imagine the bow length they need to get through the pattern or the group of notes or whatever it is. A lot of the musical aspects, including intonation, tempo, all those are greatly informed by audiation. And then you develop the physical coordination to be able to apply that audiation on an instrument instead of with your voice, basically, is what it is. All right, what time is it? I've gone past our hour. You guys can remind me. I easily forget things here. Let's just finish this screen. Follow MLT skill learning sequence when possible. Think our oral verbal association, going down that order. And it's not like you have to do it weeks after each other. The older the students get and the more advanced they are, the more you can just pop one right after the other. And like when you're introducing a new rhythm or a new tonal sound, hear it first, think of this tonal rhythmic syllables, perform it in some way, and then apply it to your instrument, apply it to reading and playing your instrument. So it just becomes a quick rehearsal cycle after they're used to it and have those skills. Okay, let's stop there for now. And all right, let's keep on going. This is a fun part to me, because this is just one of those things that when I first heard it, it's like, yeah, that's right. So notice I have a bunch of notes and a bunch of time signatures up here, but look at my heading, measure signatures.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was so appreciative that when I read the chapter on rhythm, this is exactly where they went with it too, because this is a newer idea too. This is one that has not been emphasized quite this way until maybe 20, 25 years ago. So, what actually does the time signature tell you?
Just say like how many of a certain note value are in a measure.
Yeah, that's exactly it. How many, what kind?
Mm-hmm.
All right, doesn't tell you what meter you're in yet, although some tend to go with certain meters more, but you have to, well, we'll get to that in a second. So what it does tell you is, in written notation, how many of what kind of note value go in each measure, can fit in each measure. And it also has almost nothing to do with time. Tempo really has to do with time. The rhythmic note values themselves determine short and long sequences. This doesn't really have much to do with anything, right? With time. So, yeah, it's called a time signature, but doesn't really tell you much about time. The next thing people would say, well, it's a meter signature. And yeah, if you're thinking meter at the measure level, that does make a little more sense. But sonically, is there really any difference between 2/4 and 4/4? I would challenge you to hear. All right. It tends to do, what it tends to be is pieces written in 4/4 could be written in 2/4 at a slower tempo and it would sound exactly. Yeah, I mean, one doesn't have to be different than the other. In other words, now they'll say, oh, 4/4, it's like more emphasis weak, some emphasis weak, but that's what you do in 2/4 in a slower tempo anyway. It's just. There are meters that move in 2s, there are meters that move in 3s, there are meters that divide into 2s and 3s, there are meters that group into 2s and 3s, so anyway. We'll get to that in a second. So time signatures are really measure signatures, that's what it does tell you. They do not consistently indicate meter. They do answer the questions how many and what kind. So meter, when we're thinking of meter, meter is a word for how steady beats are grouped and divided. So we, at first, focused on the divided part in a music learning theory approach, because we're having them focus at the macro beat level, and if it's divided in 2s, we call that duple. If it's divided in 3s, we call that triple. In traditional music theory, which is focused on the measure, it's more about how they're grouped. Two steady beats that are grouped and that kind of repeat over and over, we call that a duple. 3 steady beats, we call that a triple. So the names are kind of consistent, but then they'll go on and just however many steady beats are in a measure, they'll give it that name. So there's a quadruple meter, there's a quintuple, and then there's compound, simple and compound, and all these other ways of describing it, depending on whether it's divided into 2s and 3s, and they just, but again, everything is looked at from the measure level instead of from the beat level. So, but no matter which lens you're looking through, meter is how steady beats are grouped and divided, and that's what we're talking about. All right, so how then, maybe I should have had my next screen because I can't remember if I have this already. Let me see. Oh, okay, that's different, yeah. So let me then ask you, before we move on to this, how do we determine a meter? If it's not by the time signature, or is that part of it?
It's by like the divisions, so if it's like divided by 3, like 2
Mm-hmm.
part of it.
So if we're labeling it using a Gordon approach, it would be, are the beats divided into two, so it's the microbeats, right? And then with the uneven meters, it's sets of microbeats, not dividing steady beats. But it still has to do with the macrobeats and microbeats, how they relate to each other, right? But let's say we're just looking at a piece. It has a time signature, it has a bunch of notes there, we're looking at a score. How do we know really how to conduct it? How do we tell what the meter is? Like, we can't always just conduct it according to what the time signature says, but that may not really go with the feel of the music. For instance, the piece I told you before, kind of a Mexican festival, a fiesta type of sound to it. We would say, listening to how it sounds, long, long, short, short, long, long, short, short. And we'd say it's an uneven meter with a paired uneven meter. It has two longs, two shorts that are kind of paired. It doesn't have a group of three like long, long, short, like that. All right. So that would be Gordon's terminology for what I just described. What time signature do you think it would be written at?
Is it like the you have the little 5/8 plus 3/8, or like how do you do it?
So bum 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 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2
Yeah.
1 2 1
Do you have like two little ones, like a little plus?
like
in the
3 plus 3
times-
plus 2 plus 2, or
Something like that.
yeah, I guess you could. That would be a really complex way. I mean, there are more traditional ways, I guess, of writing it.
Wouldn't the key signature actually, I mean, not the key signature, the time signature actually change from like 6/8 to, is it 2/4? Or like,
That would
alternate?
be dun 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 dun, because if your beat stays the same.
Right.
Here the microbeats staying the same, that's why it's an uneven feel. Da, 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 da. So how many of those are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you could say 10/8, right? And then you notice, because it has groupings of like dotted quarter, 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 or 8 notes that are that same length, 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2. You would say there's 4, it's in 10/8, but there are 4 macrobeats a measure, and you conduct the macrobeats. So there, 10/8 doesn't mean you're going to conduct a 10 pattern, right? It means, since it's a faster tempo, that's the other side of determining a meter, tempo. So it's how the macrobeats and microbeats relate, and then how fast it is. The same thing at a slower tempo could be felt differently. And that's really obvious with 3/4. Da, 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 da. We probably wouldn't think of that as a triple meter unless we're really ideating slow. Da, dee. Most people would probably think they'd probably say it as a duple meter, but 3 beats a measure type of thing. But bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. If we do that fast, it starts to feel like 1, 2, 3, do-da. If we do it slow, bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. So tempo determines the meters to some degree as well, and definitely determines what note value we're feeling as the macrobeat too. The really slow 4/4, the 8 note would feel like the macrobeat. Normal or faster, or normal, the quarter note does. If we went really fast, it'd start feeling like the half note should be the macrobeat, like we should be doing in cut time. So tempo has a lot to do with macrobeat. How the beats are written or divided and grouped has to do with it. So let's go back to my example. So most composers would write that in 10/8. Most conductors would conduct that in a 4 pattern. It was a piece that was written for school ensembles, and evidently the composer thought 10/8 would be too tricky, so they wrote it in 5/4, which technically has the same amounts of notes per measure, but that tells the conductor you should conduct it in 5 beats a measure. Da, 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 which works out, but does that go with the flow of the music? dun, 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 dun. It makes that first half of the measure a syncopation pattern each time instead of macrobeats and microbeats. Da 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 da, which is a whole different feel and flow than da 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 da. So all I'm telling you is that the time signature alone doesn't determine the meter. You have to determine that using the tempo and the way notes are written. How the macrobeat, which note values feel like macrobeats and microbeats, how they're grouped, how they're divided. So that will determine the meter, and the meter determines how you conduct it. If you're wanting to feel the phrasing and the style the way it was intended. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Think about that for a while.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, yes.
Now, so many of the songs that we have, we do just look at, it's in 3/4 time, we use a 3 pattern, whatever. If it was fast 3/4 time, it might feel better as a 1 pattern. I've actually conducted kind of faster 3/4s and a 2 pattern, da, 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 da. If that was kind of the half, quarter, was over and over and over like that. So really, your conducting is more about the feel and the flow of the music than it is about some technical aspect of the notation and the numbers in front of it and things like that. All this to illustrate, time signatures alone don't tell you how you should conduct it, don't tell you the meter. The feel of the music, the flow of the music, the tempo, those things will tell you much more so. And especially in educational music, they'll tend to not be consistent because they'll want to use something the kids already are familiar with, like that 5/4 versus the 10/8. You know, with 10/8, they might have had to bump it up to a grade 4, and it was a 3.5 or a 4. You know, and maybe they had a contract for this beat. You know, there's just all this stuff going into it. When it gets up to professional level, it's probably, you know, the same thing. It'll work. But the younger it is, the more odd things they do to try to make the kids get a certain sound using the symbols they already know. You know. So anyway, just a little food for thought there. So we've talked about this in percussion class. Let me just really quick go through this again for you. We talked about it some yesterday. Choosing a rhythm system. So I'm just saying why I chose the Gordon system. Again, this is kind of thinking through comparing and contrasting different systems. It's created around how rhythms sound and feel versus how they're notated. It develops rhythm audiation. That's one of the main purposes for it, instead of notational decoding. You know what I mean by notational decoding?
Sorry.
So you're like trying to take meanings from notes on a page as opposed to bringing musicianship to those notes, right? Again, it's kind of that outward in instead of the inward out aspect of music making. It's consistent across musics. So any metric music that so far has come up, been in the different cultures in the world, it can represent consistently with the syllables. And it's representative it's representative of all musics is what I just said. It's consistent across musics, is you don't have to have the same sounds being represented with different syllables. The same sounds will always be represented with the same syllables no matter how they're notated. Right? So if you have ba 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 and it's in cut time, quarter dot, quarter half, quarter half, quarter, you'd say do day, do day. If it's written as eighth quarter, eighth quarter, eighth, and 2/4, it'd still be do day, do day. So it's about the sound, not about how the notes are representing the sound. So you can have what's called enrhythmic notation. The same rhythmic sounds written a number of different ways. That's common in music. Rhythm notation developed in different places simultaneously, and some traditions tend to do this and some traditions tend to do this. So like 2/4 versus cut time versus 4/4, you can write the same exact sounds in any of those. So why use one or the other? Well, cut time was used a lot in marches. So So if it's a march music, maybe it's written in cut time instead of 2/4. You could write the same thing with one level faster note values in 2/4, and it would sound exactly the same. Yeah. So it all comes out of like medieval practices where they had a circle that was the perfect Trinitarian way of doing rhythm. 3 beats divided into 3s, we'd say 9/8 was what the circle meant. And then there's a circle with a slash was what we think of kind of as 4/4, 2 beats divided into 2s. And then the cut time was the same thing, but it was showing that a different note values. You know, it just kind of comes out of that tradition. Depending on what country you were in and what style of music, it went from there and developed different. Now they try to piece it back all together in the 20th century. So again, focusing on notation, it can be more confusing than focusing on the sound of the music. You know, so. And the ease of use and transfer. The syllables are natural, easy to say syllables. They transfer, like I said, easily into vocal music principles with the darker vowels, forward placement, things like that. And this last one is, the transfer is just like Gordon versus Takadimi, you know. There's not a huge difference audiation-wise between the two if you make the adjustments I was talking about. But I just like the sound of the syllables better for other educational purposes. But, so I gave this, I think, to you guys at the beginning of percussion methods, but those 2 levels on the bottom are the 2 things that I said I tweaked that I ran into as I was trying to make a syllable system that would apply to everything, not only developing audiation, but through notation at a professional level. So although not specified by a Gordon system, I'd use a ga syllable between the divisions for what I call subdivisions, like 1 level faster. Do to dig to do to get dig to. So that'd be 8 on a beat instead of 4 on a beat, or do to get dug to get dig to dig to get 12 instead of 6 on a beat. And it was interesting how I came up with it, that we would need these differences. I listened through Bach's Goldberg variations and thought, okay, what syllables would I say here? What syllables would I say? It wasn't even 20th century music or something. You know, I'm like, and that's how I came up. Well, it feels like this should be the macro beat, but it's dividing into 8s or 12s, you know, and I don't have a level for that. So let's make up a level for that. And then the triple divisions idea, that's the thing that really got the guys that made up Takadimi. That this has been, like I said, something that people said, well, we need something that is, yeah, we have triple microbeats, but we don't have triple divisions, and there are musics like swing that are based on that. So in swing, it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, da 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 da. It's a triple division instead of da 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 da. That's underlying all the music there, and you move in long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, like that, right? So that's what swing style is. It's using music with triple divisions, and then also you need a lot of syncopation. That's another characteristic. In our 242, one of the people in their notebooks for their example of swing, they put bum ba 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 dum ba dum ba dum dum da dum, because I had that triple feel. You know, you could think dun da dun da dun da dun da dun, and that'd be technique, but it didn't have any syncopation. So we wouldn't call that swing. We'd call it a triple feel to a piece, right? Do day do day do day do day would be what's underlying that. So anyway, bum bum ba lum ba bum 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 ba lum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum. You can either think do daddy do daddy do daddy do daddy, or do day do day. So fast marches and triple meter would be another example of where you need these triple divisions, and that's where the band directors ran into it. They're like, we're not feeling do daddy, you know, we're feeling one level apart from that. Do daddy. So by adding those 2 things, you can fix any of those issues, and I did that long before I knew that people had made up a whole other system that fixes them too. So, but I like my version better because the duga tiga dega tiga is the double tonguing, and duga dega is triple tonguing. So it has another band tie-in that the other doesn't as well. anyway, keep this. We'll come back to this for the middle section, the tonalities, in a little bit, and when we're doing improvising. So let's move on. We went over this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this since we did this in percussion class, but those are Gordon's 8 functions, duple, triple combined, and then uneven and intact. Remember us talking about those things would be his 5 types of meters, and so that's different terminology than traditional music theory uses. They use some of these terms on the side, but not all of them. And they apply these to how many beats in a measure. There's no combined, but they call uneven asymmetric, and there's no intact. That was a thing that he heard in some 20th century music and said, oh, we need a different name for this. So if you are wanting to get into studying all that stuff out at some point, you should have those sheets from your other class. Remember, they have definitions for everything on the bottom, and so if you're wanting to really understand kind of this conceiving of meter from a sound and feel instead of a notation version, then this is a good reminder. And then I just gave you an example of how you'd say each one with rhythm syllables. That's one pattern in each box. Think of each box kind of like a measure. That's one pattern that is an example of each one. So, if I were drawing out a complete map that had mine in there too, I would have subdivisions, and I'd have triple divisions in there somewhere, but for right now they're all just kind of in the idea of divisions, and I have no idea audiation-wise where they fall. These are labeled according to audiation difficulty, the macro beat being easiest, pickup pattern being most difficult. I don't really know because I've never researched it where the other ones would fit in, but anyway, that's a nice, efficient presentation, I think, of some of that stuff. At least it's worked in me explaining it to class after class, and I actually made it up for high schoolers too that came in and didn't know the system. We practiced it there. So, all right, harmonic improvisation levels. So let's take a little stop here. We're transferring from our idea of rhythm into our chapter 4, teaching improvisation and composition. The other thing that just for grins and giggles and every once in a while in practicality is that beat divisions sheet that I gave you guys in percussion, where I have syllables for, it starts with do and then dividing into 2, do day, dividing into 3. And I actually made that up for all the way to 12 on a beat. I think I had you guys do through 8 on a beat, so that was kind of me really geeking out with syllables and coming up with an option. But by the time you get past 8, you can't say them that fast anyway, so it's kind of pointless. Yeah. But you'd have to, if you're thinking functionally, it's a little interesting, but you wouldn't actually have kids try to say that. But up to 8, that's pretty typical. Do to get together, or even 12. Do to get together. If you were doing 30 seconds in a 3/4 or something like that. What was I saying? Oh, but then it has the, what would you do with the 5s and 7s? Do to beta, do to beta, do to beta, do to beta, yeah. And that they do have a lot. So that would be handy just for high school groups to have in your back pocket. If you have especially, they'll have 7s a lot of times as a run. They'll have 11s and things like that too, but basically, if you start on this beat, stop on this beat, move your fingers really fast, it's hard to actually think that fast in a functional way, but violin, glissandos and things that you guys have all the time that are crazy amount of notes in a beat, It's more of an effect than a rhythmic precision type of thing when composers do that anyway, so. All right, so thinking about, let's see. So in 242, we did spend some time on talking about a whole bunch of different types of improvisation activities, and I kind of put them in order from most simple to complex for you. I did the same with composition activities, so just looking back at those, it will have a lot of good ideas. I did just kind of condense some things for us to go through today here, and some of the some of the typical types of things that we could do. So I made out a sheet that just has some of the activities explained in case you forget the steps and you want to try them with a group. So let's think through this first of all a little bit. And I don't have, let's see. Yeah, I'm just going to take this down for right now because I don't have a display for that. But let's just look through these. I think they'll be pretty straightforward to you. Rhythm improvisation is a good place to start. That tends to be easier for the kids than tonal improvisation. Help students learn to improvise rhythms in meter if they can improvise their audio. So that's a plus. Chant 4 macro beat rhythm patterns in a call and response format. We did a lot of that. You know, do 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 do, right? And then have students answer instead of with a pattern that's the same as yours. Going to improvising is have them answer with a pattern that's like yours, right? So change something. So maybe if I do day, you could do day do. You kind of demonstrate and give them some options there. So that's the first level, and this is first grade. This is first grade improvisation, or even late in kindergarten if you've gotten to syllables at that point. I used kindergarten for stand and oral and kind of went through the pre-audiation stuff and tried to bring them to, and then started with a formal audiation instruction in kindergarten. But if you had them in K3, K4, you know, by the time they're in K4, K5, definitely be appropriate a year or two into instruction in that way. And so let's do some of these together. Go ahead and stand up. Now, remember when we're doing anything with rhythms, in audiation instruction and rhythm, we're moving. So let's see. Let's make it interesting. Instead of just doing our do's and do days, let's go into uneven meter and challenge our brains a little bit here this morning. Challenge our brains in our musicianship. So let's go. I'll keep it easy to start out with. Let's go 3 plus 2. Do ba be do ba do ba be do. So let's just echo some patterns first. Do ba be do ba do ba be do.
Do ba be do ba do ba be do.
Do ta ba ta be ta do ba do ta ba ta be ta do.
Do to bata bita do, they do to bata bita do.
Do be do ba do ta ba ta be ta do.
Do be do ba do.
Do be do ba do be do.
Do be do ba do be do.
Do be do ba do ta ba ta be ta do.
Do be do ba do ta ba ta
bita do.
Do ba be do ta ba ta do ba be do.
do ba be do ta ba ta do ba be do.
All right, yeah. So straining your brain a little bit, but we're getting there. So using do's and start with just macrobeats and microbeats, and obviously you'd be starting in duple meter, not uneven paired, right? But unless you're from Greece, their folk music is more like this, and so they're used to these sounds more than some of the others. But some of the Eastern European nations that are kind of surrounding that area of the world, so that's kind of interesting. They're used to moving in 5s and 7s and things like that more in their music. So let's stick to, for right now, to do's, do bays, do bobbies, so macrobeats, microbeats, and I'll say a pattern. And together at the same time, just because we're just practicing, say something back where you're changing up a little bit. Okay, but let's for right now stay with our macrobeats and microbeats. Do be do be do be do. Yeah. So you can start it the same as mine and end it different, or you can just choose. I'm gonna. Just put a do where he did a do bobby, or just try and change something up a little bit. Ready and listen. Do be do be do be do.
Do be bobby do. Whoops.
All right, so
How did I do?
yeah, you put a do bobby where there should be a do bay. So
Do be do bobby. Wait.
You-
Do be bob. Wait.
okay, so we're okay. Let's take it back a step. So it's do bobby do bay. It's a 3 then a 2, then a 3 then a 2.
So I did 2 and 3. I did 2.
You start trying to put a 3 on the second macrobeat of the measure.
Okay.
So
Do
you were
bobby,
making up a new
do
meter.
be.
Do bobby do bay do bobby do do be Okay, so you're trying to switch it into a feel of a triple meter. Do Bobby, do Bobby, do Bobby. And you're putting a 3 where there should be a 2. You're putting a do Bobby where there should be a do bang.
So
All right,
this is
okay.
little twos.
Your body wants to go into something it's used to
Okay.
here. All right, so
Okay.
let's just echo a couple more. And by the way, you know, if you see people aren't succeeding, you take a step back. Notice when I went to some of the TAs and we didn't get it, I went back and then approached it in a simpler way. Remember, tricky stuff at the beginning is easier than tricky stuff in the middle or later in the pattern for them to audiate and remember, okay? All right, ready and go. Do Bobby, do bay, do Bobby, do Bobby, do bay, do. Now we'll do a like. Do Bobby, do bay, do Bobby, do Bobby, do bay, do Bobby, do. Yeah, the easiest thing is just change. If I did a do Bobby, do a do, or if I did a do bay, you could do a do. You know, just change a microbeat pattern into a macrobeat or vice versa. All right, ready and go. Do 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 do. Do bay, do. Now, in an uneven meter, what function is the easiest? What's the simplest? Normally it'd be macrobeats.
Oh, the micro.
The microbeats is
Yeah.
yeah. And don't say subdivisions.
Oh.
Where that's subdivisions is a general theory term that just means any level of it. We're focusing on the exact levels of it right now. And then I use the word subdivisions to be faster than divisions, if we're using that. But in traditional lingo, subdivisions just means any division of the beat. You know, it's not a specific function. So it's kind of a general concept. All right. So the easiest thing is just the microbeats, and then next would be the macrobeats, and then it goes on like normal after that. All right. So elongation or divisions, elongations, rest, syncopation, tie, pickup. You know, all of those 8 patterns. All right. So yeah, you can do all of those in uneven, just like you can do all those in anything else. Do, be, do, ta, ta, do, be a syncopation pattern, right? All right, or be, do, or be, do, be, do, would be a pickup pattern. Be, to, do, to, ba, to, be, to, do, be, to, do, ta, 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 do. You know, that'd be a pickup pattern that also has syncopations in it. So you can get as tricky as you want. But all right, go ahead and have a seat. Let's go on to our next steps here. Now, I'm having fun with you by starting you off on something really tricky here, but that's only because we've done a ton of the other ones in the other class already. I know you can do those, so I'm just stretching you a little bit this morning here. So, have students answer with the patterns like yours, but not the same. Demonstrate some examples, then have the high rhythm aptitude students go first, or if you ask for volunteers, maybe pick the one that you know has more of a likelihood, a chance of succeeding. Start using neutral syllables. We started with solfege because, again, it's you guys and we've done a lot of it. But you try improvising with sounds is a lot easier than trying to improvise with solfege, right? Oral, then verbal association. I jumped you right to verbal association, and I jumped you to an unfamiliar meter so that you could experience it more from a student perspective in that way. Setting limitations at first helps. For example, let's make up patterns that just use do and do day. And like I told you guys, just macrobeats and microbeats in that case. Once students can improvise vocally with rhythm syllables, have them respond by playing their instruments. So now you either play a pattern, they play back, or you say a pattern, they play back. And that's actually a lot easier. That's an oral thing too. So hopefully they have syllables going on in their mind now, but they don't have to succeed at it, so to speak. They just have to do something that sounds like it fits in the meter. All right. Now, if they just do something that's totally different, then you just know that they're not there yet, and that's fine. But maybe one thing that we do with younger kids is kind of take theirs and put it into a correct response. So maybe da 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 da, and then that kind of shows them that okay, I'm connecting with them, I'm musicking with them, if you want to use it as a verb, but I'm not like, oh, you did it wrong, you know. It's just showing them how they can kind of fit what they did into what you're trying to do. So that takes some comfort on your end of it to make those on-the-fly adjustments. And then use rhythm improvisation skills as building blocks for other types of improvisation. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped. So then once we can do it like with the teacher in the class, then you can pair students up with their neighbor and have them do the call and response thing back and forth. One of them says a pattern, the other says the same, or then says a like one back, and then just have a little rhythm conversation. And then you kind of go around the room and hear what's happening. That's fun. Some are really getting it, some aren't getting it at all. And then you know what we need to do next. The idea of rhythm improvisation is way more comfortable, especially for high schoolers who've never done anything before. Emotionally, it's way more comfortable because they're talking. They can talk. They know how to talk. You know, it's not singing stuff back and forth with you, which in instrumental music, they're going, why are we singing anyway? You know, they then tend to grow up in choir all their lives if it's a public school setting, so it's more awkward. But the talking, they're glad to jump right in and do that. And they think of improvisation as being something with popular music styles, and so it's cool and it's a positive thing, you know. So it's an easy going right into rhythm, and then using that once they're comfortable with the idea of making things up instead of just playing what's already written, then you can try the same thing tonally and go from there. All right. So tonal improvisation. Again, I'm just doing pattern back and forth. That's the easiest place to start. Tonal improvisation, same thing, but with tonal patterns. Once students know scales or arpeggios, they can use them to practice improvising. Improvise vocally on a neutral syllable, then with a solfege. So maybe, again, for comfort, if we did like 3 or 4 note scale patterns, that they're really familiar with the sound of going up and down a scale, right? So that would be a good place to start. So I might say something like after we echo a bunch of bum, 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 you know, just little patterns. Then I could say, I'll do one that leads away from Do, tonic, whatever, concert B flat, whatever they're used to hearing. You do one that leads back to it. And then we're kind of doing a call and response where it's phrases. I start the phrase, they end it in that way, tonal phrases in that way. So students could answer with like patterns, same function, or different patterns, different function. Once we get into the functions, we're talking about the arpeggiated patterns, tonic and dominant, things like that. So as we're teaching them tonic patterns, dominant patterns, then we can start to specify the type of improvisation. When using solfege, the teacher often needs to help students connect the correct solfege syllables to their tonal improvisations, use their pitch pattern, but correct the solfege so they know how it should work. So when you're first vocally improvising with kids, you might sing do, mi, so, and they sing bum, 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 but they call it do, mi, so. So you just go so, mi, do, you know, they matching up the words with the sounds, like hopefully they get the sound right. That means they're ready to do it. They understand what you're doing. But it takes some time to get comfortable with matching up solfege with those sounds. Yeah. So without saying no, that was wrong, you know, just right back, bum, bum, bum. So, mi, do, and then have the class that's not paying attention just thinks you're singing another pattern, but you're looking at them and they know that you're correcting them, and then the next time they try it harder to think of which one go with which instead of just whatever comes out, you know. So that's just a little tweaking technique there that is very helpful. 3, when students can improvise vocally with solfege, have them respond by playing their instruments. So now you play bum, bum, bum. They play a different tonic pattern back, and it just sounds like these chords. We've done those types of activities, right? So you say, if you can't think of one, just play mine backwards, or start it like mine, but then end it different. Or, you know, you give them some scaffolding to get into it, and you practice it a bunch of times, and then eventually it starts to sound like just chords, and you know you have it, you know. And you say, you could go start bum, 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 come back to the same note. You don't have to have 3 different notes, just choose do, mi, so. Or if you're in a school situation where they don't know solfege, you're just using letter names at that point, and that limits it to that one key. There's less transfer by doing that, but at least gets them started in doing that. But especially in band, teaching them the solfege and getting them used to that is a huge time saver, because then you can use that and they all transpose it into their key that they're playing in, instead of you having to give 4 answers every single time for the 4 different keys that the students are playing in. So, all right, all of you on this do, go ahead and play, you know, and instead of all of you on B flat, F, blah, 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 or just concert B flat, and they have to do all these mental gymnastics to figure out what it is. You know, by teaching them solfege and singing solfege with them, then that becomes a functional way that's a shortcut to get to what you're trying to have them do tonally. So, just one more side advantage of that whole thing. In strings, they're all playing the same notes, so it's not as big of a thing. But the main thing is, you have one set of solfege syllables instead of 12 sets of major scales, minor scales, you know, all of those that they have to learn. Transferring's a lot easier. Therefore, transposing's a lot easier. Because you're just thinking within a key, and then you change the key and think the same thing within that key, instead of having to think of a whole new set of letter names and how, or else like keep it a fourth apart from your first one visually, or all these manipulative type of things that we do to try to teach kids to succeed, but without having them develop the mental processes that they actually should be doing, you know. So like that's the way. Okay, I'm a trumpet player. Play along in church. Add 2 sharps and play up a note. And I always did, and the right notes came out, right? But actual transposing is thinking in a different key, right? So I say da 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 da, and I played in this key instead. You know, that's what actual transposing is. And by using solfege, I think of, oh, that's do mi do, but I'll play it in F instead of E flat. You know, or if I'm a different instrument, I'll play it in F instead of B flat or what. So again, we have all these little kind of non-musical tricks and fixes that in music education that, yeah, we get them to succeed, as in perform so it sounds like what we wanted, but we haven't given them the skill internally that we're actually trying to have them emulate, you know. So that's one of the cool things, is approaching from ideation first. You're giving them the mental skills, and then having them conceive totally differently of what they're doing. Instead of reading pitches being this, it's da 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 da. You know, it's sound inside when they see notation, that instead of pushing buttons or fingers or whatever it is, you know. So, okay, let's see. Once students can improvise vocally with solfege, have them respond by playing on the instruments. Sing or play 4 notes from a scale, then instruct students to sing or play 3 or 4 different notes, 3 or 4 back. I used words the first time, numbers the second time, that's funny. Draw their attention to patterns that sound like beginning phrases, lead away from tonic, and patterns that sound like ending phrases, lead back to tonic. Proceed to arpeggiated patterns. So we did all this vocally, now we're doing it instrumentally too. Use tonal improvisation skills as a building block to other types of improvisation, like improvising beginning and ending phrases or harmonic improvisation. So what do we mean by beginning and ending phrases? Instead of just pitch patterns, it's pitch and rhythm patterns. Bum ba da dum ba da 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 da. Finish it, you know. And then this time you start it and I'll finish it. And this time you start it and your neighbor finishes it. You know, so now that would be a next step after you do patterns separate, put them together and do simple melodies back and forth. First echoing them and then changing something, and then antecedent consequent phrases basically is where you're headed from that. So, all right, harmonic improvisation is improvising a melody over a known chord progression. We did this whole sequence. Remember our books, Azera books that we worked through that had kind of 7 steps to harmonic improvisation and composing and all sorts of stuff in there. So that's what we're talking about here. It requires confidence in improvising rhythm patterns and meter, and improvising tonal patterns and tonality. So those 2 things we're just talking about are readiness then for the next more complex types of improvisation. Harmonic improvisation skills allow students to harmonize songs by ear. So if you have someone who can make up a harmony part along with the song, that's one type of harmonic improvisation. If you can kind of play a counter melody along with the melody, that's also harmonic improvisation. There you're improvising rhythmically as well as tonally If you're just harmonizing, you're just doing a tonal harmonization, but it's the same process. You're hearing chord progressions, you're hearing when they change, and you're making your notes fit with that structure. And then see harmonic improvisation, hand out for steps. So this is another one that I may have given you in the past, but just from the aspect of review today. Make sure I'm getting one of these for Nathan too. Actually, this is a good place to take our next break. Let's just do a 5-minute break this time. We went a while. Okay, so let's just review the sequence that we learned for harmonic improvisation as we went through our musicianship through improvisation, Dr. Azar's books that we used in 242. So I've written down like the 5 main categories that are leading you to harmonic improvisation, but then I've written down for you as a teacher all the little steps that you do to help kids get through that each level and learn each level. Right, so let's just experience it. We'll start at this hour and probably bleed it over a little bit into this afternoon. But let's go ahead and just apply this whole harmonic improvisation sequence to a song. So let's the song I've chosen for today is very simple. Long ago, goes like this. Ba da 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 da. Ba da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ba da 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 ba da. Thinking in 4 phrases. Which phrases are identical?
1 and 3.
1 and 3. Good. Ba da 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 da. Exactly the same both times, right? Phrase 2. Da 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 da. Phrase 4. Ba da 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 da. So it starts the same but ends differently in phrase 4. Right? So again, a lot of repetition, both rhythmically and tonally within song, which is typical of a lot of the songs kids learn the first year or two in their band or string books there. So let's go ahead and put your instruments down just for a second. Let's go through a couple of the steps to learning a rote song. So this time as I'm singing, just keep in your mind. And does this sound like a major, minor, or something else song? Major, good. So what kind of question? What level of the skill learning sequence was that question?
It's one of the last ones.
One of the inference
Theoretical
learning.
understanding? No, wait.
It's an inference, right?
It is an inference because I haven't told you what meter it is yet, or what tonality it is yet.
Isn't it
It'd be a generalization.
generalization?
Yeah, you're taking your skills of thinking, okay, this is a sound of a major tonality,
Yeah.
and then you're applying it to a new song, right? So if I asked that of a group that wasn't to that level yet, I would guess 1 or 2 kids might know and the rest wouldn't, and that's fine. Then I say, how'd you know it was major? And you'd say something like, it sounded major, because high aptitude kids, they already categorize these things in their mind. Or if you've been teaching with me for a long time, or learning with me for a long time, you say, I was audiating do as the resting tone, because that's how we define it as we're teaching tonalities. So if you said it sounds major, say, oh yeah, good. What do you think the resting tone would be called? And then try and lead them to, oh, it's do, so it's major. Yeah. So let's check. Do. Go ahead and keep that in your audition while I sing this time. Do 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 beats and micro beats. I'm not going to spend all the time because I think you guys already know it. All right, let's sing it together. Ready and go. Actually, this is an important step that I tend to skip. I'll get you started and then audiate through the song. Raise your hand when you're done. Ready, go. Close your eyes. Good. Yeah, we all raised our hand within like half a second of each other, which after a whole song is really good. With kids, you have them popping up all over it all the time. Not eventually, but at first. All right, let's sing it together on do. Ready, go. Do, 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 do. Notes or rhythms, so I know we're ready to go on. If I did, we'd go back and review whatever phrase that was, then put it in again with at least the last, or that half of the song, if not the whole thing. If I heard lots of mistakes, we'd go back and do phrase by phrase and focus on it a little more. All right, so if this is do, what tonal pattern would you say we have first in the song? Kind of think through it. Think the solfege. The tonal solfege. What would you say would be a good first tonal pattern that we could focus on? Remember, repeated notes are not part of the tonal pattern, just the changes. Okay, you're talking about harmonic function. We'll get there. So I'm thinking in solfege now. So yeah, it's going right up a scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. And then once it gets to la, then we have a tonic pattern. So, mi. Right? So let's sing our do up to la. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. And then so, mi. Yeah, so that's the two tonal patterns. And you could divide it. You could say do, re, mi, fa, sol. You could put it in little chunks if you wanted. All right, so how, thinking in C major, how would we play a concert C major? How would you play that on your instrument? Give it a shot, see if you can figure it out. So do your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and then figure out so, mi, those two patterns. Yeah, okay, good. I'll sing a pattern, you play it back together. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. So, mi. Yeah, second phrase. Ba, da, da, dum. Ba, da, da, dum. What do we hear for tonal patterns in the phrase 2? Yeah. So is it first of all, is it scale patterns, diatonic, or arpeggiated patterns? Scale patterns or skip patterns? It's like a lingo for kids, you know. But is it diatonic or arpeggiated?
Diatonic.
They're both diatonic. Good. So fa, mi, re would be the first one. What's the second one? Fa, mi, re, do. Yeah. So I'll sing each of those. You play them back. So fa, mi, re. Fa, mi, re, do. Good. Then we already know third phrase is the same. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, so, mi. Here's phrase 4. Da, 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 da. What would our tonal patterns be in phrase 4?
Also diatonic.
They're both diatonic as well. Good. And how would we sing them?
So, fa, mi, re, mi, re.
Okay, now you're doing the rhythms too. I want you to just focus on the tonal patterns. We'll get to that. Yeah, so we have that same one, so, fa, mi, re, we had in phrase 2, but then instead of fa, mi, re, do, we have mi, re, do. Yeah, no fa in that. So that's the only difference. A lot of it is the same as the first phrase tonally, isn't it? All right, let's play those two. So, fa, mi, re. Mi, re, do. Good. Now, this time focus on the rhythms, and I usually start with the rhythms, but for some reason I decided to do tonal today. Probably because it's the trickier of the two. So this time think about what meter it is. Think about what rhythm syllables you'd use to represent the rhythm patterns in the song. Bum 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 bum. Alright, so what different rhythm patterns did you hear? Well, first of all, what meter are we in? Duple, because we're audiating
Do and do that.
do's and do days. Very good. And all right, so chant one of the patterns that you heard in the song for me.
Do, day, do.
Yeah, that do day. That happens a lot, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Do day, do day, do day, do. So then we have a 2 macro beat. No, do day, do day, do. So that do day, do that we just did, that comes a bunch more times. Anything different than the do day or the do day, do?
Do.
Yeah, we have do to do at the end. Good. And that's really our three patterns that we have in the whole song. All right, so let's audiate the song, but say the rhythms. Ready, go. Do day, 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 do. Yeah, so remember it's that do day, do to do. And this last one, 2 macro beats?
No.
How many is
Like
it?
4, yeah.
Do day, do to do.
3.
So it'd be 3. Yeah. Or you could go do. The way I'm singing it is always 3. I've been doing 3. But yeah, who knows if it's notated, it may have 4 at the end. Or may have a rest at the end. I don't know. I'd have to look at whatever book. And it may be different from book to book too.
Question.
Yes.
So is there a reason why you did like some inflection while you were doing the rhythm? Like the do, day, do, kind of added?
Yes, because we don't ever say rhythm patterns monotone. We say them as phrases.
Okay.
Yep. So that it's not do day, do day, do. That's not music. That's just sounds, right? Do day, do day, do day, do. So I've showed you the build up and the climax of the phrasing at the same time as we're doing rhythm patterns. And if you all say it like that, the kids will tend to say it like that too. Then you're teaching 2 things at once. All right. So yep, phrasing is a lot about rhythm, not just melodic contour. All right. So notice I didn't have you sing do day, do day, do. I could have, but I'm trying to separate the rhythm and tonal parts and just kind of analyze the patterns. And then once everybody knows the patterns, I know that you can figure out a song by yourself. All right. I know that you know how to perform the patterns, especially the pitch patterns. I know that you're able to think and audiate the rhythm patterns so that you do put that do to do at the end instead of just do day do again. And by these are all common rhythm patterns that we've said back and forth. So now we're just showing the kids how they fit into music. But this whole having them figure out the patterns thing orally, this is a song by ear. It's easier looking at them, right? But if they can do it orally, they're really audiating them, right? And so that teaches them to hear music and phrases. That teaches them to apply the patterns they know to music, and then those are the steps they need to be able to figure out songs by ear instead of just pure trial and error. You know, a lot of kids, if you just told them to try and figure out a song by ear, they'd just play till they made a mistake, then they'd play again till they made a mistake, they'd play again, you know. They wouldn't be thinking of the song holistically, they wouldn't be breaking it down in their mind into rhythms and pitch patterns and eventually melodic patterns and what harmonies underneath it and all the stuff that I'm training them to listen for and to analyze in their minds as they're breaking down a song. Right? So once they learn how to break down a song that way orally, it is easier for them to figure it out by ear, and they'll be a lot more accurate. Again, higher aptitude kids, they don't need it. The sound's already in their mind, they figure out what buttons to push to make the sound come out, they're there. But for them, it helps them to start to think functionally, which isn't necessarily a natural thing. That lets us put labels on functions, and that lets us do things with those functions like later on. So even for them, it's very valuable just for a different reason. All right, go ahead and play through the song once. Ready, play. When I said play along with harmony, you took it a whole extra level.
I was like, oh, maybe
That's where we're, I should say, you play melody, I'll play harmony. That's what I mean. We're headed there. That's where we're getting. But the students wouldn't be ready for that yet. At least most of them. What harmonic functions did you hear as I was playing that time?
One,
Tonic and what do we call it? 5? Yes, tonic and dominant. Function words are tonic and dominant. 1 and 5 is kind of a shorthand for it, but all right. And I hold up 1s and 5s when I say them, but this means tonic, this means dominant, right? So yeah, it's all tonic and dominant, pretty easy. All right, so since I know that you can do this, I'll skip the steps of me teaching it to you and have you just sing the do's and so's where they change, along with me singing melody. So you're going to sing harmony, I'll sing melody, but you're doing the root melody, you're just singing chord roots, all right? Do, do, like that. Ready and go. Do, 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 Now, did the harmonic pattern of phrase 1 and the harmonic pattern of phrase 2 match? Or were those, I'm sorry, phrase 3. We talked about how the melody in phrase 1 and phrase 2 is the same. Yeah. Was the harmony also the same? Yeah. 1, 1, 1, 1, both times, right? How about phrases 2 and 4? That's phrase 2. Phrase 4. Yeah, so phrase 2 was 5, 5, 5, 1. Phrase 4 was 5, 5, 1, 1. Yep. And just like thinking through it like that, they know it. It's just when you're comparing and contrasting like that. And I may one more time just hold them up, but then after that I don't need to, because they're thinking, all right, it's just all 1s in phrase 1 and 3. 3 5s and a 1, 2 5s and a 1. And that's easy for almost everybody to remember right away, all right? So let's go ahead and play. You guys, I'll sing melody, you guys play root melody. Ready, play. This length, we'd probably work on figuring out the melody the first day. We come back to it the next day and figure out the root melody, put them together. So we're already a couple days into it, not a couple minutes into it, right? And part of figuring out melody would be figuring out one phrase at a time. I had you do the whole song at once. With kids, we'd be doing one phrase at a time and figuring out the patterns, and then playing it, and then going on, like gradually working through it like that. All right. So if you look down at your sheets here, Roman numeral 1, sing the root melody, the chord roots. Okay, so this is assuming we have a song, right? So now to work toward harmonic improvisation, first of all, we need to learn the root melody. So what are the changes, what chord changes, and where do they change? When do they change? Students learn the root melody with solfege and sing with the class. Students audiate the root melody while the teacher sings melody. I skipped that step. Students sing root melody while teacher sings melody. You guys did that. Students form pairs with one person singing melody and another root melody. We skipped that step too. I just had you go right to instruments. But for sake of kind of you doing that step, instead of singing it, let's have you play a duet now. All right, who wants melody? Who wants root melody?
I'll do root melody.
Okay, and your melody, and I'll undergird you with the chords on piano. I'll give you a. The same exact thing. You have 2 people, you can do this whole activity. All right. So we're ready to move on to Roman numeral 2. So the first part in learning to do harmonic improvisation is learning what the chord changes are and when they change, and we do that on a single note melody by playing those roots. All right. If we're doing it in a piano lesson and they know chords, we could do the same thing with roots and then immediately go to heaven and play the chords. Now, in an ensemble where everybody plays one note at a time, we have to use the ensemble to get the chords, and that's the next step. So, looking at next step as in step 3. We're on 2 right now. Okay? Improvise rhythms on the root melody. So to kind of lead them into that process, let's just look through the steps here. We won't do all of them. Students echo rhythm patterns with syllables in the meter of the song while moving to the macrobeats and microbeats. So we figured out this is duple meter. All right, let's get up and let's echo some duple meter patterns together. Then students echo each other's rhythm patterns with the syllables, so that we do the pair and share thing. We're just doing syllables back and forth echoing. Students sing the root melody with rhythmic improvisation while teacher displays chord symbols. So now we use duple meter patterns like you guys were just making up with each other, but instead of saying syllables, we're going to sing them on the roots. Okay, so it might go something like this. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Just whatever duple meter rhythms come into your mind, you just sing them on those pitches. All right, so let's try that together. We'll all be singing something different, but as long as we're in duple and changing at the same time, it should work. Ready and go. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 ba-da-ba-ba-ba-bum. Bum, ba-da-bum, ba-ba-bum-bum. All right, so I chose to throw a lot of rest in and make it interesting, and some kids will do the same thing, by the way. Some will just say bum, 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 but they'll like hear the melody in their mind and just kind of copy that. But hey, that's a choice. That's a you know, it fits the context, so it works. No, my computer went off and I don't know what time it is. 10:44. Okay, have a couple more minutes here. Okay, students repeat activity while teacher sings melody and displays chord symbols. So now I sing the melody and you guys do that. We're going to skip that step. Students repeat the activity without chord symbols. So I just sing the melody and you improvise your parts. Let's do that step. Ready and go. Da, 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 da. Wait, so you guys are singing rhythms on the root melody.
Okay, great, sorry.
Ready, go. Do, 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 do. Find do and so on our instruments now. Hold do together. Hold so. Good. Now instead of singing, play it. So play rhythm patterns on the root melody. Ready and go. Ya, da, 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 the other one improvise on the root melody, and I'll do chords underneath.
Melody this time.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
We know how this works. Then technically go to the next step, but yeah. Okay, so just think through those first two steps. We'll save step. Well, let's see how many minutes. Oh, we have a few minutes. Okay, let's go on. So this is everybody goes quickly through these first two steps. This is not too bad for kids. The next one is really difficult because now we're going to start having them think in tonal patterns and match those on their instruments. So the class chord singing is an intermediate step that we need to do to lead them to be able to do the arpeggiated thing. It's kind of, so letter A there is a whole kind of time of practicing a separate skill in itself that gets us ready for the one we're really headed for, which is step B there. Right, so students learn necessary tonal sequence to sing chords as a class. And so here, I think I've given to you this before, but just to make sure, this is 4-part chord progressions. I have, like, and it's by solfege, for major and harmonic minor, and then turn it over and it's for 4 other tonalities too. So you'll see on this sheet I go all the way through, in major and minor, I go all the way through to pretty complex chord progressions. But these are like the order you learn them in. You learn a 1-4-1, then a 1-5-7-1, then a 1-4-5-7-1. It kind of goes down and gradually leads you up to that. So all we need for this one is the 1-5-7-1. And I put 1-4-1 just because it's easier to audiate. So when you're singing as a group, that's not as hard as doing the 5-7, which has a whole step against each other, right?
Yeah.
So, but for right now, look at the. Let's see, let me flip up my page open too. Look at the options for the 1-5-7-1. So this is if you want things soprano, alto, tenor, bass, or you can just do part 1, 2, 3, or 4 if they're all soprano or whatever. Yeah, that's kind of in an SATB situation. That's what 1, 2, 3, 4 would be: soprano, alto, tenor, bass. But then you have each other switch. You switch parts into it. They're just 4 different parts of doing each chord. So one part is a do, ti, do. Second part mi, fa, mi. Third part so, so, so. Oh, I got a so and a sol there. Interesting. Then do, so. Do is our roots that we already did. So we only have 3 of us. If you have 2 of you, probably you would choose the do, ti, do, and the mi, fa, mi. That would give you the basic sound of the. If you did any others, you'd be really missing. It'd be really empty. But with 3 of us, we'll do the first 3. I'm sorry. The 1, 2, and 4.
Mm.
We just leave out the fifth, and that'll sound. That'll sound like that way. So, who wants to be part 1? Okay, part 3 or 2, I mean. Okay, and I'll be part 4. All right, so here's do, mi, do. You can do lower, high. Ready, sing. Do, so, do. Good. Play those on your instrument. Ready, go. Good. So now we can have, if we had a 4th person, Nathan was here, we could have somebody play melody and the rest of us do chords underneath like that. And that's the kind of intermediate step to doing arpeggiated stuff. It just helps them to start hearing the harmony in chords, and then they'll have that sound of chords in their mind when they're jumping around to notes, and it'll kind of be within that larger harmonic context of chords in that way. All right. So when we come back after lunch, bring these instruments again. We'll continue on through the sequence, and then practice giving each other some rhythm patterns and other things as well. So, all right. So thinking through just the 5 big categories or levels, if we want to say it that way, of developing harmonic improvisation. First of all, we learned to sing a root melody with what song?
Long time ago.
Long ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Right idea there. So let's just sing that one more time. Ready and sing. Do 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 put that do pattern on the end, right? And that's just what I do with students. Yes, I remember, because we already went through all this, I'll just remember do on the end. Let's sing that last phrase. Ready and sing. Yeah, that's it. Good. So we learned also, then we learned the melody, then we learned to sing the root melody, the chord roots with the song. Go ahead and do that on do and so while I sing the song. Ready, sing. Do 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 do. Yeah. Next, improvise rhythms on root melody. So we're in what meter? Duple meter.
Sorry, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We could be in 2/4. We could be in 4/4. You have no idea because I never showed you the notation. Either one would be appropriate. We could be in cut time. You can make those sounds easily with any of those time signatures and others, but those are the most common. So let's do. Or let's have you say just on bum, 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 with a bum syllable, improvise rhythms on that root melody like we did before. Ready, go. Bum, do, 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 Now, play it. Go ahead and both of you do the improvised rhythms on the root melody, just on your instruments this time, and I'll play melody on the piano. To the end, we transfer it to our instruments, and we could do any sub-step in between that as well, if needed. We left off with starting into level 3, change chord tones on each macro beat. first of all, we got used to making chords as a group with tonic and dominant. And now is where our arpeggiated sequence comes in, that we do the do, mi, so, mi, do, fa, la, fa, do, that we've sung before. Only in this song we're just using tonic and dominant. So let's sing just those two arpeggios. Ready and go. Do, mi, so, mi, do. So, fa, re, ti, re, fa, so. Do, mi, so, mi, do. And for ease of singing and for beginning instruction, keeping them in inversions keeps them within 5 or 6 notes there. So you can get the sounds without having to spread them all out high and low and everything.
I
Yeah.
have a question. So why, when we do the 5, why do we always go so, fa, re, ti, re, fa? Like, why do we start at the top as opposed to the bottom?
Again, we're starting each one with partly because we're starting each one with the root, but mainly because we're putting it in a form that stays easily within their voice or easily within the notes that they learn right away on their instrument. So if we went so, ti, re, fa, re, ti, that'd be way up high, or so, so, ti, re, fa, re, ti, so is lower than most of them can sing. That's more of a bass or deep alto note there. And I'm basing this around kind of a concert B flat major, C major, D major. Usually, depending on your instrument, you're starting in one of those 3 keys that are, so as we move those chord progressions in, that they all fit easily within a voice of somebody who's not an experienced singer, and they can match them more quickly and easily. So, also, if you're playing piano, your students probably first learn chords in that same exact set of arpeggios, right? Because they can fit it all within their hand. So it just kind of all coordinates together. Now eventually we extend it up, extend it down, but when we're first learning it, that's just the easy way to sing and learn to play. All right? So let's go ahead and figure out on our instruments. Do, mi, so, mi, do. So, fa, re, ti, re, fa, so, do, mi, so, mi, do. Just play around with it until you have it figured out in concerts in C major, concert C major. Yeah, not the easiest fingering set in the world for trumpet there, right? But we'd normally be playing this in your C major. I'm just going halfway between B flat and D by having C, so it's miserable for both of you instead of great for one and horrible for the other. No, C is not bad, but on trumpet, it's one of the hardest keys to tune. You know, as he's moving his third valve slide in and out constantly. At his D major on trumpet, the low D major is incredibly sharp, the high one's incredibly flat. And so you're moving the tuning slide out to make the low one in tune, and you have to lip up the other one to make it in tune. So just, that's not a key we would begin in on brass instruments typically. But since I'm letting you use your primary instruments here, we're good today. All right, so let's go ahead and slowly do them each one. And learning to play the arpeggios, this is a bunch of technique. This is a bunch of fingers, especially on woodwinds or even brass, you know, but especially woodwinds. Strings we're getting used to, we probably won't play all of them on one string, so playing some on one string, then moving and getting used to kind of jumping back and forth. So this takes a little bit for a lot of kids to get, and so we just take one note at a time and get it faster and faster. You know, as with anything with technique, we start slow and then gradually work it up to performance speed. So, all right, let's just hold out each note, and we're starting at do, ready, go. Do, choose one. Yeah, and if we had more, we'd have a chord, right?
Yeah.
And then we could listen and see if we hear all the do's and the mi's and the so's. Maybe we don't hear as many so's. Somebody jump onto that, and we can balance and blend. And so from very early, like week 3, maybe we're doing this type of stuff. We're playing full chords and balancing and blending them, which we wouldn't do for months otherwise. All right, let's take the same thing with dominant chord. Ready and play. So, right? Do, mi, so, do, so, fa, re. So we'll do 1, 5, 1. Ready, go. Do, mi, yeah, good. So those are our options. We're loading them with the pitch sets and getting them used to moving around. Now the next, if we look at our sheets here with all the little steps on it, improvising chord tones, students echo tonal patterns with syllables for each harmonic function used in the song. So we've already done tonal patterns the other day, but that'd be a good place to start to get them ready before you're doing full arpeggios. And then students sing the arpeggiated patterns, like we just did, while teacher displays the chord symbols. And then students echo each other's tonal patterns, so now we can pair and let's say, let's play tonic patterns back and forth. All right, let's play dominant patterns. So this is just a way to give them more time on the same thing, another activity that will help them. And then they can help correct each other. It's peer evaluation, peer feedback as well. If it's within the same section, the section leader can show some fingerings, without me having to tell everybody everything, or you as the director. So that's a helpful intermediate step. Students practice changing chord tones within single chords as the teacher holds up the chord symbols. So now, instead of all of us just playing together, think of a note you want to start on, and then every time I show the chord symbol again as a new beat, change to a different note in the chord. Okay? So we'll just start slowly and we'll gradually get to, so we're changing faster. And so let's go ahead and start with tonic. Ready and go. Okay, so yep, and there's no beat on this one. We're just holding because we're focusing on tonal things. So both of you started on do. Just for variety, somebody pick something different. Ready, go. Students, if that's hard for you, just go straight up and down the pattern like we just did. But if you can skip around, skip around. And that's with each level, it's good to have at least a couple difficulty levels and give the folks who are just going to wipe out something that they can succeed at. And then as you get comfortable, maybe just go back and forth between a couple is a good place to start. Then the second would be go up and down. Then the third would be skip around. So we're kind of breaking even that step down into. But some people can do jumping around right away, so I'm not taking the whole group through each of those steps. Yeah, and that just kind of comes by experience. I'm just letting you know how it goes here. So, but that idea applies to about everything you're doing. Try and think of what you need to do to lead up to the task, and then if needed, take a step back or 2 steps back and practice those things together. Okay, now students sing chord progression of a song's root melody, changing chord tones on each macro beat, while the teacher displays the symbols. So now we're instead of just holding the do's and the so's, hold one of the tonic notes and hold one of the dominant notes, but change every time I give the signal again. So instead of do, 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 it'd be more like mi, do, so, do, that type of thing. All right, so here we go. But instead of just doing, I never practiced dominant with you. Let's practice just changing notes on dominant every time I show you. I know you could probably do it without practice, but students definitely couldn't. This is harder for them. Ready, go. Choose the same notes.
What is Timothy gonna play next?
Yeah.
It's like a little fun mind game.
And again, if you even have 10 kids, then you always have all the notes, or 5 even. With 2, it's tricky. Okay. Now, let's do that activity, but instead of just a bunch of tonics, a bunch of dominants, let's go in the pattern of the chord progression for the song. All right, ready, go. Take turns, one plays melody, one plays harmony, we can do all those steps. We can have me do one, you guys do the other at each time. We won't take the time to do every single one, but when you do each of the single steps, that helps everybody to stay together. Keeps having some variety for those who it would be incredibly boring if you went as slow as everybody needed, but yet it gives a little bit harder each time instead of a lot more difficult each time. All right, now teacher sings the melody. Well, you guys do that or plays the melody. Now, teacher no longer displays chord symbols. Students form pairs with one singing melody and the other improvising chord tones and switch. So let's do that last step, but as playing instead. Okay, so now you're kind of gonna make a duet with each other. Only it's a tone arpeggiated duet in this case. All right. So who'd like melody this time? I know you guys are kind of switching back and forth. All right, and you just switch chord tones according to the progression. I'm not going to show it, you just think it in your mind and switch once time. Ready and go. Okay, so that should have been a 1.
Oh.
Da 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 da. It's back to 1. Okay, and if we're not ready, then I just show the whole. Yeah, but just think ahead and think when the changes are going to happen, and make sure you change them. Again, ready and go. And on the mi, sa, the do, either way it works. So switch, ready and go. Yeah, okay, and that's a nice little duet. So your improvisation, rhythmic improvisations on the root melodies is kind of the end of level 2. Your jumping around on each change is the end of level 3 there. Okay. Now, guess what's next? So now we can move around in our chord tones. We can improvise rhythms. What should we do next? Combine tonal and rhythm improvisations. So now you're going to keep changing chord tones, but you're also going to play different rhythms as you go. And again, this is right on your sheets there. I'm just kind of skipping some of the steps, but otherwise this is exactly what's on your handout there. So a good way to work into this. Students practice improvising rhythm patterns while changing chord tones. So this is a skill we need to practice now, right? We could just jump right into it, and some could do it, but probably it'd be pretty tricky, especially those who are just trying to still think of how to change those chord tones. Do that while you're adding rhythm in now would be kind of tricky. So let's just practice that. And again, I'll do a bunch of tonics in a row just to let them get comfortable. Then we'll do a bunch of dominants in a row. Then we'll gradually go into the pattern of the song. It's kind of the same process, only with both things happening now. All right. So let's improvise rhythms on tonic patterns now. Ready and go. Jump into the song there. Yeah, I'm just letting people practice a bunch of tonic subs, all right? Now let's practice some dominants. Ready, go. instead of just playing all notes, you can put some rests in if we've gotten to rest patterns. If we've gotten to syncopation patterns, try doing some syncopation stuff, you know. So whatever level of rhythm improvisation they're at vocally, they can apply to their instrument at that point. All right, now let's do that with the pattern of the root melody. So let's do the root melody pattern that goes with Long, Long Ago. Ready and go. Remember we switched back to one earlier the second time. Da 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 da
Which is
da.
fine if you're on a G.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a good thing to notice.
Yeah.
Not G for you, but if you're on so,
So-
then
Yeah.
that goes with both of them.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to notice. All right. Now let's just do the same thing. You guys do the same thing. I'll play the melody on piano.
Okay.
Ready and go. Yeah, good. Now, any idea what step 5 is?
Passing notes.
Yeah.
Just need those passing notes.
Add non-harmonic tones.
Yay.
Yes, and for this to work as a group, I'll say you can put some of your scale notes in between the tonic and dominant pitches, but just make sure you're back on one of the tonic or dominant pitches every time I show the next symbol. All right. So let's do that with just a bunch of tonics and a bunch of dominants, then we'll do it in the pattern of the song. Ready and go. Dominant. Dominant. Okay, yeah. So you can do scale passages, you can jump around. If you get lost, you can just hold the root melody and do rhythms on that for a while. You don't have to necessarily do every second one thing, but now you can add non-harmonic tones.
Are you encouraging them to add non-harmonic tones on the beat as
Off
well?
the beats.
Or only off the
Yeah,
beat?
this is the macro beat I'm feeling
on
that I'm
that
showing
beat,
you.
we
Be
always
back
have
on
to
the
be
be back on
a
the harmonic.
tone.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then move in between it.
Yeah.
And we take a while practicing that. That takes some getting used to. And one thing that's important on your sheets, it says this. I haven't said it yet. At each level, when we put it with the song, students can choose which level that they're comfortable with and do that. Some people can just straight play the root melody and that'll sound good. Some people can play the root melody and do rhythms on that. Some people can change back and forth between harmonic tones. Some people can do that with rhythms. And there'll be a few who are comfortable enough right away to add the non-harmonic tones in and go from there. So once we have the non-harmonic tones, what are you guys playing? There's a word for what you guys are playing.
Playing
There's like a music texture word. It is a kind of accompaniment, specifically what exact kind? Think of it in terms of not the chord progressions, think of it in terms of playing that while I'm playing the melody. Yeah, you're doing counter melodies, or if you're up higher, it's a descanter, an obligato, right? But yeah, so this whole sequence leads students toward playing counter melodies. So it's not just harmonizing where we all play the same rhythms, it's improvising whole different melodies that also sound good with the tune we're playing. Why do they sound good with the tune we're playing? Because we're using the same chord progression for both. That's what rounds do, by the way. That's why rounds work. Because at each place in the round, the chord progression repeats. So it makes it consonant with each other that way. All right? So let's give you another shot doing your thing. I'll play melody, and then we'll wrap it up here together today. That's the end. Now, if we can work through, so we can do everything vocally before we do it instrumentally. In an instrumental group, I wouldn't make them get totally solid vocally because it's a lot harder to do this when you don't have this propping you up, you know. But at least after a while, they can get there, and definitely in high school, they can get there. It might be, depending on how much singing they've had, kind of difficult to get that far for middle schoolers. But I'll just say for our kids who came up through kindergarten and were doing audiation type things, middle schoolers could do this. We do this in beginning band. So we'd start working on it sometime first semester. We'd get all the way through the steps by the end of the year. And then we'd play a piece where some of the kids were harmonizing it, some of the kids were doing counter melodies, some of the kids were doing melody. We'd make up an arrangement, a little introduction, verse where everybody's playing melody and harmony, and then one word featured counter melodies, you know, and we just kind of make up our own little arrangement. Then you can turn that into a composition by having everybody write their parts down. So at first, I'll usually let them write it down any way they can to remember, like invent their own notation, and then we'll talk about how to turn it into regular notation too. So yeah, and so when we play these songs by ear at our concerts the first couple of years, there'd always be a couple kids who had a piece of paper and had just written down things to remind them, you know, because they're lower audiators. They couldn't just keep it all in their head as easy as some of the other kids could. And then those that are higher aptitude will want to do the counter melodies, and you know, everybody can just pick whatever works. They're one of the chords, harmonic background, or they're the melody, or they're the counter melody, and you can do duets of counter melodies and do all sorts of interesting things. Get too many of them going, it just kind of sounds like a mess. But it's a consonant mess, at least, that they're all changing on the downbeats, you know. All right. So that series is something that I learned at Michigan State as part of my master's classes that Dr. Gordon was teaching, and some of their professors there. And whether it's middle school or high school choir, beginning band through advanced band ensembles, you know, I didn't direct orchestras, it worked the same way in a string setting. This is one of the most creative ways to approach advanced improvisation I've ever seen, because you can let kids do whatever they can, and it still sounds good in an ensemble setting the whole time. So this isn't the only way we could approach improvisation. There are a lot of ways, and in fact I gave you a lot of ways on your lists for our 242 when we were studying improvisation. But this is, I would say harmonic improvisation is one of the most advanced and difficult types of improvisation, and so you know, it's getting them a long ways. If they can do this, they can do a lot of the other stuff, like I'll start a phrase, you finish it, or let's embellish the melody, or you know, some of those simpler things that we typically will have students do to start out. So, all right. Questions about this process or teaching improvisation in general?
Maybe not so improvisation, but like chords. When do you, like, in band and orchestra, when would you introduce tuning as far as, and singing? When you tune a chord, you're not just playing C, E, and G, so do, mi, so. You know, you want to tune it so that it's I don't know, what's the type of tuning called?
Oh, you're
You know
talking
what I mean?
about
Is that-
just intonation versus
like not
what
on
a piano would be, right.
how you tune a string or
That's
like,
just
you
intonation.
know, the me has to be a little
Yeah,
raised.
yeah.
So like,
So,
is that necessary
It's
to?
not, because
Okay.
if you're singing it, you'll do it naturally.
Okay.
And then you just copy on your instrument. The only time it matters is if there's a keyboard accompanying you. So in choral ensembles, singing a cappella, and in instrumental ensembles, everybody but the xylophone, you know, the mallet keyboards can play easily in just intonation. And if they're audiating the harmonies, then they'll just do it naturally. Now you might have to adjust them a little bit for somebody who isn't audiating very well,
Okay.
you know, but to say, okay, so this is another of those technical workarounds. All right, so if you're the third of the chord, play 13 cents flat. Like anybody
Yeah.
knows exactly how to do that, you know, or just shade it a little bit flat. But if people just grow up singing a cappella and are comfortable with that, and then they play instruments, they'll do the same thing on their
It
instrument.
should, okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Because I know, like, in orchestra and a lot of the times we're tuning these chords, and
Mhm.
or actually more in quartet and quintet,
Mhm.
we're like any saying like that, and it doesn't seem like people know that naturally.
Right, because
And-
they're used to thinking in their part linearly, they're not used to thinking vertically with the whole group as much and paying attention. Or maybe they just haven't noticed they're at that note in the chord, or maybe
Yeah.
their harmonic audiation, which leads to better intonation, hasn't been developed very much because they're a melodic instrument, you know,
Okay.
so yeah, and there is a time when if something's not settling, you take that chord out, you sing each of the notes. If their singing's not in tune, you adjust it, and then you play it, and usually it'll be right in tune. If not, start to say, I hear something's a little, so and so's a little, this part, you know, the so is a little bit sharp. Would you know, you can kind of do that type of thing. If there's somebody that's just not audiating it and they're blasting away, you know. But I will tell you, for kids who, for the first year, sing everything before they play, or almost everything, that comes so much easier than it does otherwise.
Okay.
And then keep singing scattered throughout rehearsals and in subsequent years. But it's not like you always sing everything you play. A lot of what you play is not singable, but at the beginning it is, and that's where you make your connection between audiation and instrument. And then you tend to keep doing that as you go forward if that's encouraged. So.
Cool.
Like I heard you practicing, and you did a passage, you went back and did it again, and each time you corrected your intonation a little bit. You knew what it was supposed to sound like,
Yeah.
so you could practice yourself. That's the goal. If our kids know it's supposed to sound like, they can practice it themselves and correct themselves.
Yeah.
And whether they make a mistake or not, technically, they know that wasn't right, and if they are not sure how to correct it, I can help them, but usually they know exactly what they did wrong, and they just do it again and get the technical side of it. So they become their own teachers a lot sooner in the process. Right, so let's say a couple things. Here's our song. Whee! Now you saw the notation. So what's cool though is, okay, I taught I didn't teach this. This is a simplified version for the beginner book here. They haven't learned how to quarter and eighths, but every beginner could play it if they just did it. And it's ironic, a lot of times beginners, when you're doing familiar songs, will change the rhythms to how you would sing it, and the direction, like, no, play it like it's written, you know, because they're trying to focus on the notation. What I would do instead is change the notation. Say, so how it's written, you're just going to put a dot on that one and a little line right there, and that's how it looks, you know. Now it's the do-to-do pattern.
Yeah.
So even beginning band songs, we'd put dotted quarter and eighths instead of 2 quarters, and you know, we mess around with it a little bit like that. So so now we're in the book. We haven't gone through the sequence for teaching reading yet, but we will. So we've gone through, they can read the melody, they play the melody. Maybe 1 song a week, I would do this type of activity with the song, only instead of teaching it to them by ear, we're just reading it. And now we're thinking, looking at the notes and seeing where would it be good to put a tonic, where would a dominant be, where would a subdominant, from the notes that are kind of on the beats 1 and 3 especially, and if it's arpeggiated, you know, what arpeggio we're using. And so they learn to analyze it visually and figure out that way, in addition to orally, and the two work together. So then we could either write chord symbols in if we needed to remember, but they're so simple for a long time that we really don't need to usually. I'll hold them up a little bit and they'll help me figure out which ones go where, and we'll try things out if they're not sure, and it's just kind of a music exploration, and we make a little arrangement of our song, so. It's good to choose one that's not too complex harmonically for that for a while, but then you can gradually get trickier and trickier with that as well. So, but again, having them jump to harmonizations that they haven't sung patterns for, they haven't improvised with, you're going to lose kids. So you keep coming back every time there's something new, and start it with the oral, then the verbal association, and then once they're comfortable improvising in it, then you can go to using it with the notation and everything too, like that. But I'll tell you, the whole first year instruction, almost everything's 1-4-5. That's it, So you won't really, or it could easily be, maybe you've heard a different harmonization, but it could easily work with just 1-4-5. So yeah, and that was one of my kids' favorite things to do. They'd much rather do that than do one more song where they're just learning to read it. Because they had grown up as musicians, and that was a more interesting thing to do musically than all play unison, So that was a reward. We used it as a reward. We'd harmonize either by me playing along with them once they got a song good, or we'd play the accompaniment track that came with the curriculum. They had a whole band or orchestra playing with them, or folk music group, or depending on what the song they were playing was, it could have different folk ensembles accompanying, and just so the reward for being able to play the melody on these single line song after song after song was play it with the harmony in some way, and sometimes we make our own harmony by doing this type of thing. So, all right. So, composition. Just a couple little points here. Had a lot of good ideas in there. We've talked about it. I've given you a whole list of things, simple to complex, in other classes. Just some reminders more than anything. As we're thinking of now composing specifically in an instrumental ensemble format. With anybody, this first one applies. The readiness for composing is practice writing notation. Just like you did with your letters, you practice writing a bunch of A's, then a bunch of B's, lowercase, uppercase, before they had you write words. So practice writing the different rhythmic values, practice drawing their clefs, practice writing in key signatures, dynamics, all those little things. And once they write them, they'll notice that they're in the music a lot more, by the way. Something about that process, even if it's really simple stuff you're doing, once they start writing, they notice, they get more meaning out of the notation. So they just notice more. It's typical for groups to just focus on pitch and rhythm the first time they go through a piece and kind of ignore everything else. Part of that is what's the difficulty level, how much they have to actually concentrate at. But part of it's just because they haven't been trained from the beginning to notice everything. So we'll talk about how to make that happen too. But just realize, and in method books that include improvisation and composition activities here and there, like the Tradition of Excellence, which is one reason that we show that one to you guys here. It's not a lot, but every unit they'll have either improvisation or a composition or a theory. They'll have some kind of other thing that's included in it too. And then throughout if you do all 2 or 3 years worth of books, so they'll keep making it a little more and more difficult. And they'll start with this like twinkle variations type of thing where you're adding in 8 notes instead of just all quarters and things like that, and they'll go from there. So kind of a melodic improvisation / composition. But they do need to actually manipulate. A good readiness for this that is typically in elementary music but could easily be beginning band or orchestra is having flashcards with like 1 beat long or 2 beat long patterns, and then they come up and arrange them and compose different rhythm compositions that way. Or you could do the same thing with tonal patterns. Which one would be a good starting? Maybe it's a 4 pattern phrase. Which one would sound better as the starting one, as the finishing one? Let's try it different ways, and then that works into melodies, when you combine the rhythm and the pitch. But every time you do a writing activity, it'll take way longer than you think it should. A lot of kids will need a lot of help.
Yeah.
All right, so it's not like don't do it. It's just plan accordingly. You're almost never going to do a 5-minute writing activity, even if it seems very simple to you. It's just going to take some time, and then you're going to be going around helping kids. Thankfully, they can work individually, so they all have something to do. And if somebody finishes, you can give them the next step or whatever. But it just takes a while. I think even in beginning band, just doing the little things in the book, take 10 minutes at least to just fill in a few symbols, because then you see what kind of mistakes they're making, and you use that as a teaching point for the whole class, not pointing them out, but saying, hey, is this note with the stem up the same as this note with the stem down? Does that change anything? And is there a right or wrong? And they don't notice stems up and stems down until they start writing it. That's not a thing. So it's that type of thing. All this stuff will just jump out to you that, oh, I've never actually told them that, and nobody else has either. So it's kind of interesting. Great place to go from there. Dictate familiar rhythm and tonal patterns. So we've done our tonal patterns, we've improvised, now let's write some together. And you'll have, by the time you're writing, they already have read a bunch of them, and they'll kind of know how it's supposed to look from your flashcards or what you're showing on the screen or whatever. They've arranged them already, and now they're just physically doing the writing part of it. You may have some software that you're working with where they're kind of notating it using a computer or online program or something. It can be paper and pencil, just depends on your situation. Does everybody have iPads or that type of thing too, which in some schools they do. And then there's some nice free software, notation software that you could use in a writing activity as well. But I'll tell you, if they do it with their hands first, they're going to notice more, like I said before. All right. Then next, after tonal and rhythm patterns separately, is combine the two. Notate melodies that they can already play by ear. And then they can keep humming through it or trying it on their instrument and figure out what's supposed to come next and figure out how that should look. Simple little 8-measure tunes. The whole first year is mostly that. So your curriculum will have a ton of good options for you. I would always find the kind of really familiar or enjoyable to learn songs ahead in the book, and we'd learn them by ear. We wouldn't learn every song by ear, but I'd pick one every couple pages, and we'd learn that ahead of time by ear. Just because, like I said, the learning by ear doesn't stop. It just kind of goes into the warm-up time or in a secondary focus time or those type of things. In between when you're doing other things. And then, kind of following this sequence that Dr. Zera outlined in our developing musicianship through improvisation, I think is the title. We learned the chord roots, so learn to notate those chord roots. And you can, after you wrote your melody, on the next line below it, you can notate the chord roots, and then you've written a duet. And then every step after that, put rhythms on the chord roots. Change notes in the tonic or dominant or whatever. You can kind of do that whole thing that we just went through one step at a time. You can eventually have them write everything that they're doing as well. And then they're composing from audiation, not from guessing. And that's this last step. Notate their improvised harmonizations. And then, once they're familiar with how sounds and symbols connect, they're ready to compose original music. At this point, focusing on form is a good way to give them direction. If you just say, go write something, that's way too open-ended. Most people just sit there and, I don't know how, even if they have done something like this. But maybe if you're talking about a binary form, let's have an A section and a B section. So write a short tune and then write a different short tune and then put them together different ways. And then theme and variations is an easy one to start with too, because you can have one variation. You don't have to have a whole 5-minute piece. The binary, ternary, and eventually rondo, and you're probably not going to get to the more longer and more complex forms than that in a composition project that's a class thing, unless you're doing it kind of over a whole semester, but that would be pretty intense. That'd be more of a private instruction or separate composition class where you get to that kind of thing. But imagine if even high schoolers had written a rondo piece before, you know, how far would they be ahead of almost every freshman music major, you know? And it's not about being ahead, it's about having musical skill, the skills of a musician, you know? So that's what you are getting when you're a music major, right? So, all right, let's take a couple minutes here and do some rhythm patterns. This should be pretty easy for us. So once again, teacher establishes context. How do we do that with rhythms? Do you remember? You do move.
Micro beats?
Macro, right?
Yeah.
Ba, 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 ba. Leave an empty measure. Ba, and then you start on the patterns. Okay, so I'll do one set of 4 patterns. You guys can choose the meter you want to have us do. I'll start with our wonderful uneven meter that we were doing earlier. All right. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Sorry, I didn't give you the cue. Ba 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 ba. Yeah. So you want to give this right on the last beat, even as you're talking. That's the thing that's a little bit tricky. All right. Syllables. Ready and listen. Do ba be do be do.
Do ba be do be do do.
Do ba be do.
Do ba be do.
Etc. Okay. So let's try do like 4 patterns without syllables, then the same 4 or different 4 if you want with syllables. Let's see if we can get through that for each of you here real quick. What meter are we doing first of all? Set us up.
Normal.
There's no normal.
Okay, not normal. Okay. So we're using bar first.
Mhm.
Okay.
So get us going with our macrobeat, microbeat, and movement. Our context pattern.
But I can do the micro beats with bar.
Ba,
Okay.
ba.
Okay. Ba 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 ba. And then what's the sign for like listening?
Oh, so just I just do that.
Okay.
You know, or you just stay here.
Oh, but I need to do 4 bars.
Ba ba ba. I'll do this or I'll do that or
Okay.
something. Then,
Just to get us in. Okay.
no.
Ba 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 ba.
And then remember. Oh, is that
Sorry,
your?
that was my context.
Okay, so your
and then-
context pattern is do they do they do. It's that specific one.
Oh, not ba ba.
Well, yeah, but I'm just telling you
Oh,
which
okay.
one it is. Ba 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 ba. That one works well. Then they know you're. They know, they hear that from you over and over, and they know that you're just getting them going. They're not supposed to echo it.
Okay. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba.
Ba. On beat 4. Ba.
Ba 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 ba.
Ba 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 ba. Yeah. So when I did it, I was going back and forth between this and this. You don't have to do that.
Okay.
You can just do the direct. Yeah. I did it without thinking. All right. Give us a couple. Do they do?
Do do day do day.
Do day.
Okay. On the 3rd.
On the 4th.
On Do, day, do, day, do.
Do, day, do. Good.
Okay.
Real quick.
Okay.
Got 1 minute.
Ready? Ready? Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba.
Ba, 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 ba.
Ba 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 ba.
Yeah, again, don't worry about padding.
Okay.
Uh,
So just
and it's this, and then out to this.
Okay.
This. This is just audiate for a second. That's a different signal. Okay, ready, go.
ba 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 ba.
Ba, 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 ba. On beat 4.
Ba 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 ba.
Yeah, you're
Sorry,
waiting for
I'm
the
like
last
waiting-
microbeat.
Yeah.
You don't have time to breathe then.
Okay, so it's
Ready. Ba, 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 ba.
okay. Ba ba ba
Go with your beat.
ba 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 ba.
No.
Sorry, it's so much harder than it seems.
I know, it's like you got like,
You got light in your eyes, you might want to move. I don't know.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, alright, I think I got it. Ba 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 ba.
Ba, 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 ba. Solfege.
Do day do day do day do.
Do, day, do, day, do, day, do.
Do day do day.
Do, day, do, day. Then we could sit down and you could do syllables and we play them back.
Oh.
Or you could play them and we could play.
Okay.
Alright, so this.
It's like thinking about that.
Yeah, I know. So this same situation, this list I gave you yesterday, teacher chants on a neutral syllable, students move and echo. Now we put those other words in for there. And you can do all these same things. They can do everything without patterns immediately here. That's the difference. You can just play things they can echo it. That's easy for them. And then we go on. Whereas you really have to wait until you've done a bunch before they can do that pitch-wise. Okay? That's all for today.